Chapter 704. When I opened the door of Chio's shoulder grave, not only did I need the 9 provinces cauldrons, but I also had to fill them with witchcraft energy. However, my cultivation wasn't high enough, so it took me a few days to fill a small cauldron. Now, I was at the middle stage of the Heaven Master realm, and the witchcraft energy in my body was dozens of times stronger than before. In just a few breaths, I could fill a small cauldron with witchcraft energy. Time was of the essence, so I could only do both at the same time. As I filled the small cauldron with witchcraft energy, my eyes quickly scanned the surroundings to find the keyhole. Soon, I checked the high platform I was on, but I didn't find any place to put the 9 provinces cauldrons. Then, I looked at the ground below the high platform and the surrounding stone walls. Although the yellow smoke in the yellow river of 9 Bends formation could block one's vision, I could see everything clearly after I used my insight power. 2 minutes passed, and the 8 small cauldrons were filled with witchcraft energy. However, my face turned gloomy. I didn't find any place that looked like a keyhole on the ground or the surrounding stone walls. Wuyue said that she could only hold on for half an hour. Now that half of the time had passed, if I couldn't find the keyhole, I was afraid that I wouldn't have another chance. I felt more and more anxious. I quickly checked all the places that might have keyholes around me 3 times, but I still didn't find anything. I didn't move for a long time, and the fatty seemed to be anxious. He asked me, "Third baby, how is it?" Hearing his voice, I quickly turned to look. The entire 10-terminal formation was in full operation. Wuyue was the main force, fighting with all the bronze giants and blocking most of the attacks. However, some of the attacks still fell on the fatty's 9 Bends yellow river formation. Although the fatty had the cultivation of a heaven master, he couldn't use his full strength due to the seal of the heavenly way. In addition, the 10-terminal ancient formation was very fierce, so he was struggling to hold on. This was a matter of life and death. The fatty was anxious, but I was even more anxious. Hearing his urging, I was about to respond when Wuyue, who had been wandering in the formation, suddenly shouted and retreated. The fatty and I instantly stopped talking and shifted our gazes towards the ancient formation. At this moment, within the ancient formation, the 81 bronze statues were moving in an orderly manner. They cooperated with each other, attacking and defending in a balanced manner. It seemed to be flawless. At this time, Wuyue was wandering in the 9 palaces' great array in the north of the ancient array. His figure was a little disheveled, and the originally neat and tidy Han robe on his body had 2 scratches on it. It was obvious that she had already suffered under the hands of these bronze colossi. While I was worried, Wuyue suddenly stopped attacking. He landed on the ground and sat on his knees. He didn't care about the bronze statues that were charging at him. He even closed his eyes. I was bewildered. I didn't know what she wanted to do. However, when the bronze colossi were about to hit her, Wuyue did not open her eyes. Instead, she raised her hands and placed them in front of her chest. Her fair fingers kept playing in the void, as though she was playing a zither. She didn't have a zither with her, but as she moved, the ancient formation released countless rhythmic zither music. It was incomparably mysterious. The sound of the zither was gentle at first, but it gradually became urgent. Accompanied by the sound of the zither, the movements of the bronze statues facing Wuyue suddenly became slow, as if they had fallen into a trance. Previously, Wuyue had said that Lu Jinyang was trapped in her zither music. At that time, I didn't know what she meant. Now, it seemed that the zither music she was talking about was the supernatural power she was using now. Lu Jinyang was a living person, so it was normal for him to be affected by the music. However, the bronze statues in front of me were just inanimate objects made of metal. It was unbelievable that they could be enchanted by the zither music. From this, it could be seen that Wuyue's supernatural power was extraordinary. Judging from the current situation, Wuyue should be able to hold on for a while. I heaved a sigh of relief and prepared to turn around to continue searching for the keyhole. However, at that moment, my eyes fell on a bronze statue facing Wuyue. My eyes instantly widened. After the bronze statue's movements slowed down, its abdomen stretched out. Right in the middle of its abdomen, there was a square, hollow lattice. Its shape was just enough to fit a small bronze cauldron. It was exactly the same as the small lattice I had seen on the giant door of Chiyo's shoulder mound. I immediately reacted. The keyhole. No wonder I couldn't find it. It turned out that the keyhole was on the bronze statues. The fat man seemed to notice my strange expression. He hurriedly asked me, "Third baby, what's wrong?" Time was tight, and I didn't have time to answer him. I quickly lifted my head and looked at the other bronze statues. I found that the abdomen of the other 8 bronze statues in the 9 palaces formation was different from this bronze statue. They were all solid and didn't have keyholes. After discovering that, I continued to search the other 8-9 palaces formation. Without exception, each of the 9 palaces formation had a hollow abdomen of a bronze statue. After confirming it, I was elated. I then replied to the fat man, "I think I found a way. This formation is actually a door, just like the shoulder mound. We don't need to break the formation. We only need to use the key to open the door. The keyhole is on the bronze statue's abdomen." The fat man wasn't stupid. Moreover, he had entered Chiyo's shoulder mound before. After hearing what I said, he was stunned at first. Then, he immediately reacted and said excitedly, "I see. The key should still be a Jojo cauldron, right? What are you waiting for? Third baby, hurry up and use the small cauldron to break the formation." I nodded and took out the small cauldron that I had filled with witchcraft energy. I was about to put it into the keyhole when I suddenly realized something. In the 10-terminal formation, there were 9 palaces formation and 9 bronze statues with keyholes on their abdomens. However, there were only 8 cauldrons in my hand. Of course, just because there were 9 keyholes didn't mean that I needed all 9 cauldrons to open it. Back when I was in Chiyo's shoulder mound, I only needed 1 cauldron to open the door. At this time, the time limit that Wu Yue had mentioned was getting closer and closer. I didn't have time to think too much. I took out a small cauldron and stomped on the ground, flying directly toward the bronze statue in front of Wu Yue. The sound of Wu Yue's zither was still there, and the bronze statue was still in a confused state. It wasn't a threat to me. After I flew to its abdomen, I directly put the small cauldron into the hollow small lattice. The moment I put the small cauldron in the small cauldron, the bronze statue suddenly stopped moving as if it had been immobilized. Not only it, but the other 8 bronze statues in the 9 palaces formation in the north also stopped moving at the same time and became completely quiet. This proved that my guess was right. The Jojo cauldron was indeed the key to breaking this formation. However, when I turned my head to look elsewhere, my face didn't look happy at all. Except for the bronze statue in the 9 palaces formation in the north, the other 8 bronze statues in the 9 palaces formation weren't affected at all and were still rushing toward Wu Yue. Apart from that, there was no strange phenomenon in the whole cave. It seemed that I still needed all the Jojo cauldrons to break this formation. At this time, I had 8 small cauldrons with me, including the 7 that I had obtained before and the 1 that had been passed down from generation to generation in Officer Wang's family. The evil sacrificial spirit had told me to collect all the 9 small cauldrons if I had the chance. So while I was in Wangwu Cave, I deliberately asked for Officer Wang's cauldron. The last small cauldron was with Lin Aching. When I was in Wanwu Cave, I wanted to find a chance to get the small cauldron. However, when I met Uncle Lin a few days ago, I met the people from Mount Longhu. Then, I was in a hurry to see Bien, so I forgot about this matter. I didn't expect to encounter this predicament. After seeing the first 9 palaces formation break, the fat man looked excited. However, after waiting for a long time, he found that I was still standing in the same place. The fat man urged, "Third baby, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and put the other Jojo cauldrons in." I forced a smile and shook my head. I told him about the 9th continent's cauldrons. Who would have thought that after listening to me, the joy on the fatty's face didn't disappear? On the contrary, his smile became even brighter. He proudly raised his hand and said to me, "Hey, look at this. What's this?" Chapter 705. When I saw the Yinzhou cauldron in the fatty's hand, I was overjoyed. "Uncle Lin has been keeping this cauldron, hasn't he? How did you get it?" The fatty laughed. When we came here, my father gave it to me. He told me that I've grown up and that it's time for him to give it to me. Then, he told me something about the 9 cauldrons. I didn't understand the details. Anyway, he wanted to give it to me, so I took it. After listening to the fatty's explanation, I finally understood. Officer Wong had told me that the 9 cauldrons were born to protect the saints. They had been passed down from generation to generation, just to wait for the saints to appear. After I made the seal, they recognized me as a saint and began to fulfill their duty to protect the saints. Officer Wong had done that, and so had Uncle Lin. However, compared to Officer Wong, Uncle Lin was too old. It wasn't suitable for him to follow me around. That was why he had given the gun prefecture cauldron to the fatty. Moreover, Uncle Lin was an elder who had watched me grow up. If he wanted to follow me to deal with things, I wouldn't be able to ask him to do it. The fatty and I had grown up together. We knew each other very well, so we didn't have any grudges when talking to each other. It was easier to get along with him. Besides, when Uncle Lin and Officer Wong had gone to Chiyo's Janwei tomb, they had received a signal from their respective cauldrons. From this, we could see that Chiyo's tomb was closely related to this small cauldron. It was highly likely that we would need it on this trip. Perhaps Uncle Lin had thought about this and had prepared in advance. I had to admit that the older, the wiser. If it weren't for Uncle Lin, I was afraid that the fatty and I would have died here. While I was thinking about this, I reached out to receive the Yinzhou cauldron and quickly poured my wizard energy into it. The time limit Wu Yue had given me was almost 10 minutes. I didn't dare to linger. After filling the Yinzhou cauldron with my wizard energy, I flew up and headed toward the second 9 palaces formation. At this moment, Wu Yue was still controlling the mysterious zither music. Although the other 8 bronze statues in the 9 palaces formation were heading toward her, they were too big. Only one of the bronze statues in the formation could get close to her. Moreover, the mysterious zither music slowed them down, so they weren't a threat to her. I aimed at the bronze statue with the keyhole. After dashing toward it, I quickly put a small cauldron into its abdomen. Just like the previous time, as soon as the small cauldron was in the keyhole, the group of bronze statues stopped and fell to the ground. The bronze statues behind them rushed toward me one more time. Since they had taken the initiative to approach me, it saved me a lot of effort. I glanced around and found the keyhole. Then, I dashed forward again. Although Wu Yu had been focused on dealing with the bronze statues and hadn't communicated with me, she obviously understood the current situation and cooperated with me tacitly. At first, the sound of a zither was very low, and it didn't have much control over the statues. When I dashed forward, the zither became louder and restrained the statues. It reduced the danger that I had to face. With our tacit cooperation, I quickly broke 7 of the 9 palaces formations. When there were only 2 left, I dashed toward the keyhole again. However, although Wu Yue's zither music was louder this time, it wasn't as good as before. She couldn't control the bronze statues. When I dashed toward them, the bronze statues' arms attacked me at the same time. In just a blink of an eye, I was in danger. The bronze statues had many arms, and when they attacked me, they completely sealed the space around me. I couldn't retreat, even if I wanted to. I gritted my teeth and increased my speed to the max, trying my best to rush toward the keyhole. Of course, the bronze statue's arms were much faster than mine. Fortunately, I was ahead of them by the time I arrived. Finally, when the bronze statue's arms were about to hit me, I put the small cauldron in my hand into the keyhole. After dealing with another 9 palaces formation, there was only 1 left. However, Wu Yue's voice sounded. She seemed a little weak as she said to me, "Mr. Zhou, I can't maintain my zither music anymore. I can only try my best to attract the bronze statues for the last 9 palaces formation to create an opportunity for you." When she couldn't completely control the last bronze statue, I'd already realized it, so I wasn't surprised. I nodded and said, "As long as you can create an opportunity, you can leave the rest to me." After cultivating for so many years, I had encountered countless dangers along the way. I had long trained my mental fortitude. I had to break this 9 palaces formation. It would be great if Wu Yue could continue to control the bronze statues. If she couldn't, I could only rely on myself. There was no room for hesitation. Then I took a deep breath. When the bronze statues rushed over, I had already found the keyhole. I immediately leaped forward. Wuyue's zither music sounded again, but it was so weak that it was almost inaudible. She didn't have much control over the bronze statues. As soon as I rushed over, the bronze statues focused their attention on me and surrounded me. I purposely slowed down and didn't rush to the bronze statue where the keyhole was. Instead, I let the 9 bronze statues surround me first. After surrounding me, the 9 bronze statues pounced at me at the same time, just like how they had dealt with Wuyue. With a shake of my hand, I had already taken out the armor-stripping sword. After looking at the position, I chose the statue opposite the keyhole. With my emotionless sword path, I took the initiative to attack it. Wuyue had said that in this formation, every bronze statue had the power of a young god celestial master. However, as soon as I started fighting, I felt that Wuyue had underestimated them. These bronze statues were probably at the complete young god realm. The power they emitted was far stronger than those I had seen on the heavenly grand ritual. Although the emotionless sword path was powerful, the gap between our realms was too big. When I attacked, the bronze statue didn't even try to dodge. It simply waved its hand and attacked me. The bronze statue was huge, and one of its hands was as big as my entire body. When it waved its hand, the air around it whistled violently. If my cultivation had been lower, I wouldn't have been able to deal with its palm. Just the air that it stirred up could have blown people away. I gritted my teeth and didn't retreat. Instead, I let the armor-removing sword collide with the bronze statue's palm. With the sound of metal colliding, I felt as if I'd been hit by a speeding train. My head buzzed. I almost lost consciousness. The armor-removing sword in my hand flew out, and I didn't know where it had landed. My right hand, which was holding the sword, split open and started to bleed. A casual attack from a bronze statue at the complete young god realm wasn't something I could deal with. I had known this for a long time, but I still chose to attack it. It wasn't because I wanted to survive, but because I wanted to borrow its power to get closer to the statue with the keyhole. While I was being hit, I focused on the angle at which the armor-removing sword had collided with the statue's palm. Even though I was severely injured by that palm, it was just as I had expected. My body was sent flying back like a bolt of lightning. It was much faster than when I had sprinted, and it was even faster than when the bronze statue had waved its arm. Since my back was facing the statue with the keyhole, I didn't know what was happening behind me. I gritted my teeth and tried to stay conscious. I held the last 9 prefectures cauldron in my other hand as I prepared for the last step of breaking the formation. As the wind whistled past my ears, it seemed that only an instant had passed before my body violently crashed into something. My extreme speed brought with it an extremely strong impact. This collision caused me to spit out another mouthful of blood. This injury wasn't any less serious than the injury I had received from the bronze statue's palm strike. However, this was the moment I had been waiting for. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, I roared and mobilized all of the true yuan in my body. I forced my body to turn around in midair. I raised my head and saw that the place I had just collided with was the chest of the bronze statue with the keyhole. I could vaguely hear the sound of wind whistling in my ears. I guessed that the bronze statue had also attacked me. However, everything had already been decided. I glanced around and quickly found the location of the keyhole. Using the last bit of my strength, I took 2 steps forward and put the last 9 prefectures cauldron in my left hand into the keyhole. Mission accomplished. Chapter 706. The bronze statues were huge. Even their chests were more than 10 meters tall. Just now, I had used all my strength to resist the bronze statue's attack. I had almost used up all the true essence in my body. In addition, I was seriously injured. When I fell, I didn't have the strength to stabilize my body. A distance of more than 10 meters wasn't high. With the strength of my body, it wouldn't cause any harm. However, I was already injured. If I fell to the ground, it would inevitably worsen my injuries. Fortunately, the fatty had been paying attention to the situation here. When he saw me fall, he immediately flew over and hugged my body in midair, bringing me back to the high platform. After landing, I couldn't help but cough out a mouthful of blood. The fatty asked me with concern, "How are you? Are your injuries serious?" Even if I used all my Jinchi, I still couldn't resist the full blow of a perfect yang spirit expert. If it weren't for Wu Yue's zither music, I'm afraid that I would have lost myself in this risky attack. In such a situation, my injuries were naturally not light. I opened my mouth and wanted to speak, but my chest felt stuffy. My throat was full of blood that I had vomited. I couldn't speak at all. I could only shake my head at the fatty, signaling him not to worry. Then I endured the pain and controlled the true dragon chi in the jade bracelet to flow out. I turned it into true essence and Dao Qi to nourish my body. At this time, Wu Yue also returned to the high platform. He quickly walked to my side with a worried face. Just as he was about to speak, there was a sudden rumbling sound. The fatty and Wu Yue immediately looked over. Although my chest was still in pain, I gritted my teeth and looked over. I saw that a small portion of the bronze statues that had fallen to the ground had stood up again. They were the 9 bronze statues in the 9 palace formation with keyholes on their bodies. When I first saw them, I was shocked. I thought that my speculation was wrong and that the small cauldron couldn't solve the problem. However, I soon discovered that the 9 bronze statues hadn't recovered their intelligence. Their bodies didn't move at all, and they weren't standing up. They were floating. In the chests of the 9 bronze statues, the 9 small cauldrons emitted a buzzing sound at the same time. Moreover, they emitted a kind of dark light as they floated upwards. Unexpectedly, they actually carried the 9 huge bronze statues up into the air. The 3 of us focused on this strange scene. I was so surprised that I even forgot to absorb the true dragon chi in the jade bracelet. The 9 bronze statues flew higher and higher until they reached the top of the cave. I didn't know if they hit the ceiling or if they couldn't fly anymore, but they finally stopped. At this time, the 9 cauldrons buzzed even more violently. The entire cave seemed to be buzzing and shaking. Following that, the 9 bronze statues moved again. They changed their direction and began to float forward. Soon, they formed a circle and began to rotate on the top of the cave with their heads and tails intersecting. Using the 9th continent cauldrons to break the formation was only my guess. Now that I had found the keyhole and the bronze statue had stopped attacking, it basically proved that my guess was correct. However, I didn't know what caused this situation, nor did I know if it was the opening ceremony after breaking the formation. After waiting for a while, the 9 bronze statues in the sky spun even faster, but apart from that, there was still no other movement. I was a little anxious and turned to ask the fatty, "Fatty, is this formation broken or not?" The fatty turned around with a smile on his face. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, the 10 absolute ancient formation has been destroyed." Hearing what he said, I felt relieved. In terms of array formations, fatty was the authority. If he said it was broken, then it was definitely broken. But since the formation is broken, why didn't it open like I thought? While he was still puzzled, Fatty spoke up. He said to Wu Yue and I, "The 10 absolute ancient formations are called the 10 absolute formations, but there are only 9 formations that are interconnected. However, the 10th array formation still existed. It would only appear when the array formation was broken. Based on the movements of the bronze statues, the 10th formation was about to appear. When the 10th formation appears, the hidden effects of the formation will be fully revealed, so there's no need to be anxious now." So that's how it is. Previously, when Fatty explained the 10 absolute ancient formation, I was still a little puzzled. So that's how the word 10 in the 10 absolute ancient formation came about. Since Fatty said that it was fine, I completely relaxed and retracted my gaze. I continued to absorb the true dragon chi in the jade bracelet with all my strength, recovering the true essence of my body while quietly waiting for the result. As time passed, the 9 statues suddenly stopped moving at the same time. The 9 imperial cauldrons also stopped trembling. Instead, the 9 bronze statues opened their eyes at the same time. They didn't look in our direction, but raised their heads to the sky and roared in unison. Following the movements of the 9 statues, The gazes of the three of us instantly followed. Lifting our heads to look at the sky, we saw that the originally smooth arc dome had unknowingly appeared with a massive pitch-black 9 palaces great array. It was continuously rotating, and the 9 statues had hidden themselves within the array, instantly disappearing without a trace. After Fatty's explanation, I roughly understood that this should be the last formation of the 10 absolute ancient formation. Since the 9 imperial cauldrons had suppressed the first 9 palaces great formations, the last formation would also be suppressed and the door would open smoothly. Just as I was relaxing, Fatty suddenly shouted, "Oh no," and pulled me and Wuyue down the high platform. After jumping off the high platform, Fatty didn't stop. Instead, he carried me and frantically ran towards the cave entrance that we had come from, shouting for Wuyue to quickly follow him. Although Wuyue didn't understand what was going on, seeing how anxious Fatty was, he naturally knew that what was going to happen next wouldn't be good, so he also ran with us. After the Fatty brought us away from the high platform, the 9 palaces great array on the dome also activated. The pitch-black 9 palaces great array suddenly cast a pitch-black light screen. The light screen was like concentrated acid. The moment it fell, the originally clean and flawless high platform turned pitch black. Soon after, it was like quicksand, turning into countless black streams that brandished their fangs and claws as they flowed towards the bronze statues in the surroundings. After running for a few steps, I came back to my senses and turned around to look. I saw countless black shadows chasing after us. Even those incomparably hard bronze statues couldn't resist the corrosion of those black shadows. If it wasn't for the Fatty who discovered them early and brought us to escape, we would have had to face those black shadows head-on. The result would have been obvious. Fatty was so tired that he was panting. As he ran, he explained to us, "This is the heaven square earth circle pattern. In terms of formations, such a pattern represents the heaven and earth. If the formation is broken, the heaven and earth will be broken." The person who set up the formation placed the 10 absolute formation in such a pattern. How could he open the door? He simply wanted to kill the person who broke the formation. Fortunately, this fat lord's attainments in the Tao of formations are extraordinary, and I was able to see through the trick. Otherwise, we would have been finished. How could this be? I frowned. From Chiyo's shoulder tomb, it was obvious that Chiyo's tomb had left something for his descendants. He hoped that they would enter and obtain it. Although there were obstacles, they were set up for others. The descendants of a 9 Cauldrons clan who held the 9 Cauldrons could enter safely. Logically speaking, the situation in the Skull Tomb should be the same. Why was it like this? I didn't understand, so I turned to look at Wuyue. It was obvious that she didn't expect such a situation after the formation was broken. She looked at me in shock, and her eyes were apologetic. Chapter 707. Although the 10 Extremes ancient formation had become abnormally dangerous, the black smoke that had suddenly emerged did not surge outwards. After escaping to the cave outside, we stopped. Looking at the scene in the passageway, the three of us fell silent. The Fatty sucked in a breath of cold air. His expression was one of extreme shock. After a long while, he asked with a trembling voice, "What kind of power is this?" With the addition of the formation, the bronze statues can display the power of the Yang God. The material they are made of must be able to withstand the power of the Yang God. However, after the black smoke came out, the bronze statues did not resist at all and directly turned into powder. How is this possible? The fat man was really frightened. He asked with a face full of fear. I also frowned at the side. This sudden change had almost completely blocked the possibility of entering Chiyo's tomb. Even the 9 provinces cauldron had been lost inside. What should I do? Tao had clearly told me that the second part of the death scripture was in Chiyo's skull mound. Although, with my current cultivation, I could still continue on the path of cultivation even without the second part of the death scripture. From the very beginning, my path of cultivation began with Tao Wu and the first part of the death scripture. Although Tao Wu did not say it clearly, there was a very close relationship between her and the death scripture. No matter how I looked at it, It was impossible for me to give up the second part of the death scripture. But what should I do now? After pondering for a long time, I could not think of any way. Facing the power of the 10 extremes ancient formation that could destroy the world, all my schemes were useless at this moment. In the end, Wu Yue spoke first. She first apologized to me and said sincerely, "Mr. Zhou, Mr. Lin, I really did not know that there was such a killer move hidden in the formation. I almost killed you too. This is my fault." In my depression, I was indeed a little angry at Wu Yue. However, my mind was focused on the second part of the death scripture, so I only shook my head and did not speak. After Wu Yue apologized, she continued, "Now that the situation is like this, do you two have any way to continue forward?" This surprised me. The doubts that I had about her earlier resurfaced in my mind. This Wu Yue first advised us to leave this place and not enter Chiyo's tomb. He even brought us here to meet Lu Jinyang to persuade us to leave. However, when she saw Lu Jinyang, her attitude changed greatly. She didn't mention anything about leaving. Instead, she expressed her goodwill and asked us to open the door. Even now, when the situation is clearly unfavorable, she still continues to ask if we have a solution. I really couldn't understand such a huge contrast between before and after. Previously, we had the same goal, so I didn't ask her anything. But now, facing the black smoke in front of us, I shook my head and asked her why her attitude had changed so much. Seeing me shake my head, Wu was disappointed at first. After hearing my question, her expression became complicated. After a moment of silence, she smiled bitterly and said to me, "Actually, I don't know if I should enter the tomb. Wu said that after my husband entered the tomb 100 years ago, he specifically told me to guard this place and not let anyone enter, including myself. For the past 100 years, I have been doing this, including persuading you to leave. It is also for this reason. My husband is a cautious person. Since he asked me to do this, it must be very important, so I didn't think too much about it. However, time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. 100 years isn't too long, but it isn't short either. I knew that I had to do what my husband asked me to do, but at the same time, I was worried about him. I couldn't wait any longer. Countless times, I couldn't help but want to go in myself, but this formation stopped me. It wasn't until Lu Jinyang appeared here that hope rose in my heart. Unfortunately, he lied to me and didn't open the formation. Then, I placed my hopes on you. Of course, I was conflicted. That night, I asked you to come up the mountain to see something. In reality, I didn't know if I wanted you to see Lu Jinyang or this formation. Wu Yu's voice was clear, and I couldn't hear much emotion from it. However, these pale words made my heart inexplicably tense. 100 years. Perhaps it was because Wu Yu is a ghost, but she didn't think it was long. In my opinion, 100 years was several times longer than my entire life. Wu Yu was a ghost, but her husband, the Taoist of Mount Longhu, was a human. No matter what he wanted to do in Chiyo's tomb, he hadn't come out for 100 years. It was highly likely that something had happened inside, and he had died. I didn't know if Wu didn't realize this because of the difference between a human and a ghost, or if she deliberately didn't think about it. After a moment of silence, I sighed. I didn't know what to say. I nodded at Wu Yu as a response. Then, I continued to think about what to do next. The final formation of the 10-terminal formation was too powerful. It far exceeded the power we had at the moment. From this point of view, it was impossible to break the formation. The only thing we could consider was whether we could use some method to avoid this formation. We could even search for other entrances to Chiyo's skull tomb. After asking Wu Yu, I learned that her husband had studied this tomb for many years and confirmed that there was only one passage in front of us. Thus, I gave up on the second thought and focused on the first problem. If we wanted to avoid this formation and enter the tomb directly, the fatty sky-measuring ruler was one of the options. Although he had already tried, and the sky-measuring ruler couldn't be used here, I didn't give up. I asked him to take out the sky-measuring ruler and study it to see if there was any hope. The fatty was a little disinterested, but he still took out the sky-measuring ruler as I had asked. However, when he was about to try, he hesitated and said to me, "Third baby, this sky measuring ruler can only be used once. After you try it, no matter if it works or not, it will eventually break." I knew that he was reluctant and wanted to study the space power in the sky measuring ruler. Thus, I hesitated. For my sake, the fatty had already sacrificed a lot. Now that there was clearly no hope, it would be too much for him to waste a magic tool that he was so fond of. However, other than the sky measuring ruler, I couldn't think of any other way. While I was hesitating, the fatty continued, "Third baby, have you ever thought about it? Even if the sky measuring ruler works, and we really pass through the 10-terminal formation and enter the tomb, how are we going to get out?" I was stunned. I hadn't considered this problem before. Back in Chiyo's shoulder mausoleum, we had returned the way we came. Based on this, it was most likely the same here. The fatty was right. Even if we got the second volume of the death scripture after entering, it was still up to me whether we could come out or not. As I thought of this, my heart instantly became desolate and chaotic. Just then, Wuyu suddenly spoke. She didn't speak to me, but looked at the sky-measuring ruler in the fatty's hand. She frowned and asked, "What is that? The sky-measuring ruler you mentioned?" The fatty didn't know what she meant. He nodded and explained, "Yes, the sky-measuring ruler contains the power of space. It can allow people to travel through space and possibly bring us through the 10-terminal formation. In that case, there's no need to break the formation." After listening to the fatty's explanation, Wuyu frowned. After thinking for a while, she continued to ask, "Can you let me take a look at this sky-measuring ruler?" The fatty didn't know what she meant and handed the sky-measuring ruler to her hesitantly. Wuyu took it and flipped in her hand. Then, she held the sky-measuring ruler and closed her eyes to think for a while. Suddenly, she turned to look at me and said, "I've never heard of the sky-measuring ruler, but I've seen this thing before." "Seen it before?" I didn't know what she meant and looked at her in confusion. Wuyu continued, "Back then, my husband also had this thing. At that time, I felt that there was a familiar power in this thing, but I didn't think too much about it. I felt it just now, and there was indeed an aura that I was familiar with. I didn't pay attention to the second half of her words and only paid attention to the first half. My heart instantly lit up. Chapter 708. Realizing that there was still hope, I immediately perked up and asked Wu, "Senior, do you mean that Mr. Dozy used the heaven-measuring ruler to enter back then?" Wu Yu first shook his head, then nodded and said, "Back then, when my husband entered this place, I wasn't there. I didn't ask him beforehand, so I don't know if he relied on this item to enter. I only saw him carrying this item with him. However, I sensed the aura of this item just now, and I can roughly confirm that my husband used this item to enter." Her words were very roundabout, but I roughly understood and quickly asked, "Since Senior is sure that we can enter with this item, do you know how to use it?" Fatty has already tried before, and he said that this place is sealed by Chiyo's divine power, so he can't use this item at all. Regardless of whether that Daozi used the heaven-measuring ruler back then or what Wiyue found in the heaven-measuring ruler, the most important question now was how to use the heaven-measuring ruler. When the fatty heard my question, he moved closer to me and whispered to me, "Third baby, didn't I just say that even if the heaven-measuring ruler can be used, how are we going to get out once we enter?" There was some worry on his face, but he was more hesitant. After saying that, he whispered again, "What exactly is inside? Can't you just go in?" It was obvious that the repeated encounters had made the fatty want to retreat. However, there was indeed something in Chiyo's tomb that I had to enter. I nodded with a wry smile and replied, "There is something inside that is related to Lao AI and is also very important to me. I know that it will still be very dangerous, but to be honest, I have to go in. As for how to get out, didn't you hear Wu Yue say that when that Daozi entered back then, he used the heaven-measuring ruler? Think about it. Wu Yue is waiting outside. When that Daozi entered, he couldn't have not prepared a way to get out. So, once the heaven-measuring ruler can be used, as long as we find Daozi or his remains, we can use the method he prepared back then to get out." After hearing what I said, the fatty's eyes lit up. That does make sense. He patted my shoulder again and said with a smile, "It's good that there's a way. Since the things inside are very important to you, then this fat lord will have to work hard and accompany you again. Although he said it casually, I knew that with his personality, he would run away as soon as he sensed danger. He definitely wouldn't be willing to face danger head-on. It was obvious that he was thinking about me when he said that. I looked at him gratefully and didn't say anything. The two of us are true brothers who grew up together. Putting aside our identities as sages and the 9 Cauldrons family clans, the two of us will definitely give our all for each other. While the two of us were discussing, Wu Yu held the heaven's measuring ruler in his hand and remained silent. After we finished speaking, Wu Yu's gaze moved. He didn't look at us and continued to look at the heaven's measuring ruler. He said, I naturally know how to use this item. However, this heaven's measuring ruler can't be used because of Chiyo's divine power seal. It's because it's severely damaged and the power it contains isn't enough. It might be able to be used in the outside world, but here, the power it contains isn't enough to break through space. So that was how it was. The excitement that had just surged in my heart was instantly extinguished. If it was just the fatty who didn't know how to use it, we could use it if Wu Yu told us the method. However, the problem was with the heaven's measuring ruler. What should we do now? Without waiting for me to ask, Wu Yu continued. However, you don't have to worry. I should have a way to repair this item. The two of you wait here for a while. I'll be back soon. After saying that, she didn't wait for us to reply and turned to walk out. However, not long after, she turned around and ignored me. Instead, she walked in front of the fatty and extended her hand. The repair process requires the power of the demon refining gourd. Mr. Lin, please give me the demon refining gourd. Although the demon refining gourd was precious, it was Wu Yu who had returned it. The fatty naturally wasn't worried. He nodded and took out the demon refining gourd and handed it to Wu Yu. After Wu Yu left, the fatty and I looked at each other. I asked the fatty if he knew why Wu Yu needed the demon refining gourd to repair the heaven's measuring ruler. The fatty shook his head blankly. I don't know. I can't understand the relationship between the two. Most importantly, the divine weapon recognized its master. Wu Yu had said that the fatty was the master of the demon refining gourd. Hence, Wu Yu couldn't even use the demon refining gourd. How could he use the power of the demon refining gourd to restore the power of the heaven's measuring ruler? We couldn't figure it out, so we could only put our doubts aside and not think about it anymore. After being severely injured by the bronze statue, my injuries had yet to recover. Hence, I took advantage of this time to close my eyes and sit cross-legged on the ground. I used the true dragon energy in the jade bracelet to heal my injuries. Ever since I had used the jade bracelet to absorb the true dragon vein of the Metaphysics Association, I had often used the true dragon energy in it to cultivate and heal my injuries. Although the injuries on my body are not light, under the nourishment of the true dragon vein, I am able to recover quickly. After my body had sufficient Tao energy and true essence, although my injuries hadn't fully healed, I only needed to rely on the true essence in my body to slowly nourish them. There wouldn't be any major problems. I opened my eyes and stood up. I looked around. Wu Yu hadn't returned yet. The fatty was sitting cross-legged not far from me, staring blankly at the cave. I didn't know what he was thinking. When he heard me stand up, he sat up straight and asked me how my injuries were. I nodded and told him that my injuries were completely healed. The fatty heaved a sigh of relief. Then it was a long wait. I didn't know how long it had been, but Wu Yu still didn't show any signs of returning. I said to the fatty, let's go forward and see the situation inside. Earlier, when we were in the cave, the 10-terminal formation had collapsed, and black smoke had spread everywhere, corroding the bronze statue. However, when we got out of the cave, the black smoke didn't spread toward us. We didn't know what was going on inside the cave. The fatty was bored. When he heard my suggestion, he immediately nodded in agreement. The two of us followed the path we had just taken. After a few steps, we saw the cave in front of us. After the 10-terminal formation disappeared, the cave was dark. We couldn't see anything clearly, only endless darkness. Occasionally, we could hear cold whistling sounds. It was as if there were countless ghosts from the nine hells hiding in the darkness. The fatty and I stopped and didn't dare to move forward. Looking at the endless darkness in front of us, we frowned. Not long after, the fatty suddenly bent down and picked up a piece of gravel from the ground. He threw it forward and into the darkness. He also had the cultivation of a heavenly master. When he exerted force in his hand, the gravel flew out and instantly disappeared into the black smoke. We couldn't see its shadow, and we could only hear the whistling sounds. Then, there seemed to be movement in the black smoke. The cold whistling sounds that occasionally sounded just now became more frequent. After a long time, we didn't hear the sound of the stone falling to the ground. The fatty shrugged and didn't say anything. However, the danger in the black smoke was self-evident. At this moment, I furrowed my brows. The black smoke in front of us was ethereal and mysterious, but it was filled with a thick, evil aura. I didn't know if it was an illusion, but I felt that this evil aura was familiar. It was as if I had seen it somewhere before. After pondering for a while, I couldn't find an answer. I gathered my courage and took a few steps forward. The fatty was so scared that he pulled me back. He said to me with a frightened face, "Third baby, what are you doing? Do you want to die? If you go any further, you might come into contact with the black smoke." Just now, those bronze statues directly shattered in the black smoke. You have a body of flesh and blood. If you come into contact with the black smoke, you will immediately turn into ashes. I shook my head. Just as I was about to explain to him, we heard some movement behind us. We turned at the same time. Wu Yu, who had left for a long time, had returned. Chapter 709. Wu Yu's expression was neither happy nor sad. After seeing us, she stopped in her tracks and smiled faintly. With a flip of her wrist, she took out the heaven-measuring ruler and said to us, "Fortunately, I didn't fail you." Hearing that, I was overjoyed and quickly looked at the heaven-measuring ruler. At this moment, the heaven-measuring ruler was obviously different. The cracks on it had completely disappeared, and it was still emitting a layer of bright white light. Moreover, the white light was very strange. There seemed to be many vortexes on it. At a glance, one's gaze seemed to sink into it. I quickly shook my head and looked away. I clicked my tongue on my heart. Previously, I'd heard from the fatty that the heaven-measuring ruler was a strange object from the primordial world. However, I hadn't felt anything magical about it. Only now did I finally feel its extraordinary power. No wonder Wu Yu said that there was no power in the heaven-measuring ruler. Comparing the two before and after, there was a huge difference. The fatty looked very excited. To him, continuing to move forward was only for me, but the heaven-measuring ruler itself was something he was very interested in. Previously, when he discovered the heaven-measuring ruler, he had been lamenting that the heaven-measuring ruler had lost its spirituality, making it impossible for him to comprehend the power of space within it. Now that Wu Yu had completely recovered its power, it would be much easier to comprehend it. Amidst the excitement, the fatty asked Wu Yu, "Senior, why do I sense a trace of the demon refining gourd's aura from the heaven-measuring ruler? Is there really a relationship between the two?" Wu Yu nodded and took out the demon refining gourd and returned it to the fatty. The fatty suddenly saw the demon refining gourd and immediately felt a sharp pain. He hurriedly covered his eyes and took the demon refining gourd. Only then did he open his eyes. Wu Yu didn't seem to be surprised by the fatty's strange actions and didn't ask. Instead, he replied, "There is indeed some connection between these two things, but..." At this point, Wu Yu shook his head and seemed to have no interest in continuing. He continued, "You will naturally discover it in the future." The fatty, on the other hand, was not good at reading people's expressions. He was still dwelling on his own question. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, his eyes glittered, and he immediately said, "I got it. There is spatial power inside the heavens measuring ruler, and there is an enormous space inside the demon purification gourd. They have the same power." As soon as he said that, the fatty became annoyed and denied himself. "No, the power is different. Although there is a huge space in the demon purification gourd, the power it contains is not the power of space. It's different from the heaven-measuring ruler. While he was still vexed, Wu Yu was not interested in discussing with him. He handed the heaven-measuring ruler over and said calmly, "If you want to study it, you'll have plenty of time to do so in the future. Activate the heaven-measuring ruler and bring us in." The fatty finally noticed Wu Yu's cold attitude. He looked at her strangely and reached out to take the heaven-measuring ruler. After sensing it for a while, he immediately smiled. "Third baby, it can indeed be used." After he said that, he didn't wait for my reply. His hand trembled slightly, as though he was forming some sort of hand seal. Then, the heaven-measuring ruler in his hand suddenly shone brightly. A glowing white light burst forth, forming a huge ball of light that enveloped the fatty within. After doing that, the fatty waved his other hand at Wu Yu and me. He said loudly, "Third baby and senior, come closer." Hearing that, I roughly knew how to use the heaven-measuring ruler. Together with Wu Yu, I walked to the fatty's side and stood on his left and right. Then, the fatty continuously made seals, and the white light on the heaven-measuring ruler surged again, enveloping the two of us. All right, this white light is the area of effect of the heaven-measuring ruler. Next up, I will activate it and travel through the space. If the two of you are afraid, just close your eyes, Fatty said with a chuckle. I rolled my eyes at him. Wu Yu was absent-minded. She did not respond to the fatty's words at all. Her eyes were empty as she looked forward. Just now, I was a little strange. I did not know why she had suddenly become very cold, but now I suddenly reacted. We were about to enter Chiyo's skull tomb. This meant that her husband's life or death would be revealed soon. He had been trapped in this tomb for 100 years. Although the Taoist had the power of a peak young god at that time, anyone would know that he was definitely in danger. Under such circumstances, it would be abnormal for Wu Yu to be able to laugh. Because the heaven-measuring ruler was full of power, the fatty was very excited. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something. I sighed and quickly stopped him. After glaring at him, I said angrily, "Shut up and quickly activate the heaven-measuring ruler." Then, I gave him a look, asking him to pay attention to Wu Yu's expression. In the end, I was just flirting with him. The fatty was stunned for a long time, but he did not understand what I meant. Anyway, he closed his mouth and focused his attention on the heaven-measuring ruler. His expression became solemn. He reached out and touched different parts of the heaven-measuring ruler a few times. Then, he closed his eyes and looked forward, urging the heaven-measuring ruler's power. Soon, I noticed that the light around us had dimmed. The cave we had been in was completely gone. Except for the area covered by the heaven-measuring ruler's fluorescent light, everywhere else was completely dark. It seemed that we had entered the black smoke. Recalling that strange familiar feeling, I quickly turned my head and tried to look around. However, the heaven-measuring ruler's fluorescent light was like a light shell that completely blocked my vision. No matter how hard I tried, I could not see anything outside. This thing could block my vision, but it was only formed by light. It shouldn't be able to block the body. If I stretched out my hand, I should be able to sense the black smoke outside. I hesitated for a long time, but in the end, I didn't do anything rash. I suppressed my doubts about the black smoke in the bottom of my heart. Around half a minute later, a trace of blood appeared in the endless darkness in front of us. The heaven-measuring ruler moved very fast. Before I could react, the blood in front of me thickened. Soon, the darkness disappeared, and we entered a world of blood. The heaven-measuring ruler suddenly stopped. Then, the three of us were thrown out of the fluorescent light like a small boat washed ashore by the waves. Fortunately, our cultivation base wasn't ordinary. We quickly steadied our bodies and stood on the ground outside. I didn't care about anything else and looked around. Instantly, I felt a sense of familiarity. At this moment, on the left of where the three of us were standing was a boundless grassland. On the right was an undulating mountain slope. Countless lush blood maple trees grew on this mountain slope. The blood-red maple leaves dyed the entire sky red. This place was exactly the same as Chiyo's shoulder mound in Jui County. The fatty and I looked at each other, and there was joy in our eyes. Before entering, we were still a little nervous. We didn't know the situation inside, but since it was the same as Chiyo's shoulder mound, we felt more confident. I turned to look and saw Wu Yue standing beside me. Her eyes were filled with confusion as she stared blankly into the distance. There was an obvious hint of panic on her face. I knew that she was worried. After thinking for a while, I turned to her and said, "Senior, you don't have to worry too much. Senior Daozi's cultivation base isn't ordinary, and he already has the ability to abstain from eating. Although it's been 100 years, he might just be trapped somewhere. Now that we've entered, my matter isn't urgent. Why don't we go and find Senior Daozi's traces first? Senior, what do you think?" Although I also understood that Daozi's situation was probably one of death, I could only say these meaningless words of comfort at this moment. Hearing my words, Wu Yue recovered a little. She turned to look at me, then bowed to me and said, "Thank you, Mr. Zhou. I know that Mr. Zhou must have come here for a reason, but Wu Yue is only here to find my husband. Everything else has nothing to do with me." As for my husband, she sighed. After 100 years of separation, not only me, but he should have suffered enough from lovesickness. As long as we can meet, we won't interfere with anything else. I didn't expect Wu Yue to suddenly say something like that. To be honest, I was a little worried. Back then, Daozi entered this place for an ancient book, and this ancient book was most likely the second half of the death scripture. Although Wu Yue had helped us a lot, once Daozi was still alive and the second half of the death scripture appeared, it was hard to say which side we would stand on when the time came. With Wu Yue's words, although I couldn't guarantee that her husband would think the same, at the very least, Wu Yue shouldn't be an obstacle when the time came. Chapter 710. The situation of the skull mound here was almost the same as the shoulder mound, so there was no need to ask Wu Yu. I looked around and pointed at the bloody maple forest on the right. I said to Wu Yu, "Senior, I once took Chiyo's shoulder mound. According to the situation there, we need to pass through the bloody maple forest in front of us and reach a place called War God Mountain. Although Senior Daozi came to find ancient books, he most likely took this path." After I said that, Wu Yue didn't react and just nodded. "Then let's go this way." After getting her approval, I nodded and walked in the direction of the blood maple forest. Just like Chiyo's shoulder mound, the air here was filled with blood energy. As we moved forward, we got closer to the blood maple forest, and the surrounding blood energy became denser. I became vigilant. Previously, the blood spirit guards had only appeared in the shoulder mound until we reached the blood maple forest. Theoretically, it should be the same here, but I couldn't guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents. Thus, I didn't dare to let my guard down and took every step with extreme caution. As we got closer to the blood maple forest, the blood energy in the air became extremely dense. It gradually formed a blood mist that floated around us. The fatty, and I didn't find it strange, but Wu Yue frowned and tried her best to avoid the blood mist as we moved forward. Finally, we reached the front of the blood maple forest. I lifted my head to look at the blood maple forest that was shrouded in the blood mist. I stopped and turned around. I wanted to explain to Wu Yue about the blood maple forest, but before I opened my mouth, I saw that Wu Yue's expression changed. The confusion in her eyes disappeared and was replaced with indescribable sorrow. I followed her line of sight. Under a maple tree in front of us, a set of black, button-down attire was wrapped around a skeleton. It was lying on the ground. Wu Yue looked at the pile of bones in a daze, and tears flowed out of her eyes. Taoist priest, she turned into a ray of light and charged towards the pile of bones. Was this Wu Yue's husband? It was as I had expected. He died here. I turned around and exchanged glances with the fatty. My eyes were filled with pity. To me and fatty, this Senior Daozi's ending was within our expectations. However, to Wu Yue, it was like a bolt from the blue. In the blood maple forest, as long as someone stepped into it, the surrounding blood mist would transform into blood spirit guards, whose strength was at least at the peak of the Yang spirit realm. Wu Yue would definitely be attacked if he entered so rashly. I wanted to remind her, but Wu Yue was a young god celestial master. Her speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, she had already reached the edge of the blood maple forest. In the next second, her feet stepped into the blood maple forest and landed next to the pile of bones. Wu Yu hugged the pile of bones carefully, afraid that his movements would be too big and break up his husband's corpse. However, he could not help but want to hug the corpse into his arms. He muttered something and looked extremely sad. The couple had been separated for 100 years, but when they met again, they were far apart. I couldn't help but feel sad. However, it was not the time to be sad. Soon, just as I had expected, the blood spirit guard appeared from the blood mist in the depths of the blood maple forest. Just like the blood spirit guard in Chiyo's shoulder mound, it was tall and red. It held a long, narrow, and huge blood blade in its hand. Its movements were extremely fast. After it appeared, it rose and landed next to Wu Yu in the blink of an eye. "Senior, be careful." My heart tightened, and I shouted in unison with the fatty. As we shouted, the blood spirit guard landed next to Wu Yu. It swung its crimson blood blade and slashed at Wu Yu. Fortunately, Wu Yu was a young god celestial master and had rich battle experience. Facing that attack, her reaction was extremely fast. The moment the blood blade fell, she hugged Daozi's corpse. Her figure flashed, and she landed next to another maple tree, dodging that fierce attack. The blood blade in the blood spirit guard's hand slashed down, and there was a loud sound in the empty blood maple forest. The maple tree that Wu Yu and her husband had been resting on was directly cut in half. At the same time, there was a huge, shocking pit on the ground. I was anxious and hurriedly shouted at Wu Yu, telling her that she would be safe as long as she rushed out of the blood maple forest. However, Wu Yu was currently in grief and indignation and didn't seem to hear what I said. She held Daozi's corpse in one hand while her other hand floated in the air. She put on a posture of playing a zither and faced the blood spirit guard not far away. She had no intention of retreating. The blood spirit guard was a product of Chiyo's blood energy. There was a huge difference between them and the muddle-headed ghosts in the ancient battlefield. Seeing that their attack had failed, they quickly adjusted their direction and charged at Wu Yu again. Wu Yu wasn't easy to deal with. She clenched her teeth and attacked before the blood spirit guard could get close to her. For a moment, the sound of the zither filled the blood maple forest. Although the blood spirit guard was strong, it couldn't get close to her. It could only wave its blood blade to resist the strange zither sound that Wu Yu had summoned. Although Wu Yu's offensive was fierce, it didn't seem to last long. She protected Daozi's corpse while fighting against the blood spirit guards. At first, she was still able to gain the upper hand, but after a quarter of an hour, she began to struggle, and the zither music in her hands became sparse. The fatty and I were anxious and couldn't wait to rush in and help Wu Yu. However, at this moment, I glanced out of the corner of my eye and saw a faint blood-colored figure appear behind a maple tree not far from Wu Yu. However, it hid there and didn't come out. What's going on? Didn't the blood spirit guard appear according to the number of people who entered? Could it be that the rules here were different from those in the shoulder burial mound? While I was still in shock, the figure suddenly jumped out from behind the maple tree and went straight for Wu Yu. This time, not only me, but the fatty also exclaimed in surprise. It was obvious that he had discovered its existence. It was difficult for Wu Yu to deal with just one blood spirit guard. Now that there was another one, how could Wu Yu deal with it? Seeing this, the fatty became anxious. He dashed forward, wanting to help Wu Yu fight against the enemy. Luckily, I was quick and pulled him back. It wasn't that I didn't want to help Wu Yu, but if the fatty rashly rushed in, not only would he not be able to help Wu Yu, but he might even make the situation worse. After being pulled back by me, the fatty was a little anxious. He shook off my arm and turned to ask, "Third baby, what's wrong with you? I know that after we go in, more blood spirit guards will appear, but we can pull Wu Yu out before they appear." Of course, I knew what the fatty was thinking. However, just as he was about to rush out, I discovered something. I pointed at Wu Yu and whispered to him, "Fatty, did you notice that the figure that came out from behind isn't a blood spirit guard?" "Not a blood spirit guard?" The fatty was stunned and quickly turned to look. Back in Chiyo's shoulder grave, we had seen at least a dozen blood spirit guards. All of them were shrouded in blood mist, holding long and narrow blood blades in their hands, and their faces couldn't be seen clearly. At this time, the figure that suddenly rushed out also looked blood-red, but the difference was that he didn't have a blood blade in his hands. He wasn't as tall as the blood spirit guards, and although his appearance was hidden in the blood, we could vaguely see that he was very handsome. He didn't look like a blood spirit guard, but more like a person. Most importantly, in the blood mist, we could see a black hanfu with the front, exactly the same as Daozi's skeleton that Wu Yu was holding. It was obvious that he wasn't a blood spirit guard, but Daozi's soul. After being trapped here for 100 years, not only did Daozi die, but his soul was also trapped here, unable to get out. While we were observing, Wu Yu also noticed the soul. She suddenly pushed with her right hand, and there was a series of explosive sounds. Then, the blood spirit guard, who had been in a stalemate, seemed to be hit in the chest by an invisible fist, and the blood-red figure instantly retreated. After repelling the blood spirit guard with one blow, Wu Yu's expression became sluggish. She lowered her head to look at the skeleton in her arms and then at the soul. Her eyes were full of confusion. On the other hand, the blood-red soul swayed to Wu Yu and reached out to push the stray hair on her forehead behind her ear. Then he sighed. Chapter 711. It was indeed Daozi. Hearing his voice, Wu Yu's body trembled violently. His mouth opened and closed twice, but no sound came out. Dao's child's soul sighed again and continued. Back then, you and I were stopped by Celestial Master Zhang. I thought that only by obtaining that ancient book would he be able to protect us. Who knew that when we entered this place, I would lose my life? From then on, we were separated by life and death. If I had known this would happen, I would have gotten drunk today. At least you and I could have stayed together for a few more days. His voice was filled with deep regret. It was obvious that he regretted the choice he had made back then. Wu Yu still did not speak. He only reached forward and tried to touch Daozi's cheek. Daozi seemed to have endless things to say and continued to ask, Yu, after I left, did the people from Mount Longhu come looking for me? Wu Yu held back his tears and shook his head. No, I did as you said, and completely hid. For the past 100 years, no one from Mount Longhu has appeared. Hearing this answer, the smile on Daozi's face became even more bitter. He shook his head and sighed again. Why bother? Why bother? I also felt sad watching from the side. I had only heard Wu Yu mention the matter between the two of them, so I wasn't very clear about it. Only now did I completely understand. Back then, this Daozi was probably afraid of the pressure from Mount Longhu and accidentally found clues to the second part of the death scripture. He felt that after finding the ancient book, he would be able to fight against Mount Longhu and Celestial Master Zhang. Therefore, he abandoned Wu Yu and entered Chiyo's skull tomb alone in an attempt to obtain the second part of the death scripture. However, he did not expect that after he entered, he would never be able to leave. Even his soul was imprisoned here. What was even more ironic was that Mount Longhu had not found Wu Yu in the past 100 years. That was why Daozi had only scared himself back then. In fact, if he had stayed outside, the people from Mount Longhu might not necessarily have found him. After a while, Wu Yu raised his head and said to Daozi, Although you've become a ghost, ghosts also have a cultivation method. You and I can still stay together forever. Daozi was silent for a moment and shook his head. This place is very dangerous. Although my soul survived with the help of the surrounding blood fog, I can't leave this place. Girl, listen to me. This is not a place you should be. It's not too late to go back now. No, Wu Yu shouted in pain. It wasn't easy for me to get here. I want to take you out with me. Daozi smiled and rubbed Wu Yu's hair lovingly. He then said, Girl, you seem to have become stronger. But this place isn't as simple as you think. Let's go. Wu Yu ignored his words and stared straight at Daozi's ghost. After a long time, he finally broke down and cried, But I missed you. I missed you. A cry that spanned 100 years not only made Daozi's soul somewhat at a loss, but even I, the fatty, couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. Daozi looked at Wu Yue, whose eyes were brimming with tears, and finally came to a compromise. He caressed her face and said with endless gentleness, "Then, you can leave first. If you want to save me, you must first barge through this blood maple forest. But you are very weak now. You will not be able to get through. Go out first. When you have the ability to continue, you can come and save me. Okay?" Wu Yue opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the blood spirit guard that she had just shaken away pounced on her again after a moment of silence. The blood-colored long blade in his hand slashed down, and a scarlet blade light bombarded the two of them like a waterfall. Before Wu Yue could react, Daozi's soul was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. Immediately, his soul swayed and was about to be destroyed. At the same time, he used some kind of spell. Taking advantage of the gap between his body's destruction, he waved his hands and created a hurricane on the ground, pushing Wu Yue, who had yet to recover, out of the blood maple forest. After that, Daozi's soul had no power to fight back under the storm-like attacks of the blood spirit guard. Under the gaze of the fatty and he instantly turned into ashes. Without the obstruction of Daozi's soul, the blood spirit guard charged at Wu Yue again. At this moment, Wu Yue finally came back to her senses. One of her hands was still holding onto Daozi's corpse, while the other hand was waving continuously. She continuously blocked the long blades in the hands of the blood spirit guard and retreated as she fought, quickly escaping out of the blood maple forest. The blood spirit guard was very fierce. Wu Yue, who was holding onto Daozi's corpse, only had the power to protect herself. She looked very miserable. At the most dangerous moment, the blood blades in the hands of the blood spirit guard swept past her several times, making the fatty and anxious. But in the end, Wu Yu still managed to hold on. She leaped out of the blood maple forest with Daozi's corpse in her arms. The blood spirit guards that were hot on her heels crashed into the invisible barrier at the edge of the blood maple forest. They burned like paper dolls and soon turned into a bloody mist and disappeared. The fatty and hurried to welcome them and brought Wu Yue back. After escaping from danger, although Wu Yue looked very miserable, she didn't have time to tidy up her makeup. She anxiously put Daozi's corpse on the ground and carefully knelt to the side. Her eyes were fixed on her husband's corpse. She didn't say a word, and I didn't know what she was thinking. I carefully examined her. Seeing that she wasn't hurt, I felt relieved. I looked at the blood maple forest in front of me and pondered. Previously, I had seen the same scenery, so I guessed that this place was very similar to Chiyo's shoulder mound in Juyi. After Wu Yue had entered the blood maple forest, I was sure that the two places were exactly the same. At least, the blood maple forest was the same. After confirming this, I didn't feel relaxed. Instead, I became more solemn. That year, in Chiyo's shoulder mound, Fu, who was as strong as a consummate yang spirit expert, couldn't defeat the blood spirit guard even after several days of hard work. In the end, Lu Jinyang entered the blood maple forest and used the Chiyu tomahawk in his hand to subdue the blood spirit guard. That's how we got through. Now that we don't have the Chiyu tomahawk, or even a consummate yang spirit expert like Fu, how can we get through this blood maple forest? When I first saw the blood maple forest, I thought that with Wu Yue's cultivation, he might be able to get through. But now, it's obvious that this method won't work. Since Wu Yue can't do it, I can only rely on the fatty and me. In terms of strength, there's a gap between me and the fatty and Wu Yue, so it's even more impossible, especially the fatty. It's been a dangerous journey. He hasn't even completely dissolved the restriction in his dantian. He can't even use the strength of a seal, celestial master. The gap is really too big. After thinking about it, I can only brace myself and try. Although my cultivation is still in the seal realm, it shouldn't be difficult for me to use the strength of a yang spirit celestial master in all aspects. Moreover, I have the Xianyuan sword in my hand. Maybe it can play a magical role. Just like the ghosts of the ghost generals and Yin spirits on the ancient battlefield outside, Chiyu died under the Xianyuan sword. Maybe the blood spirit guard formed by his blood, and Chi will also be afraid of the Xianyuan sword. As long as I can get through, according to what Wong Can said at the shoulder burial mound, I'll break the rules of this place. Then, the people behind me will be able to pass. After making up my mind, I told the fatty and Wu Yue. Wu Yue was still immersed in his sorrow. When he heard that I had a way to get through, he immediately agreed. However, the fatty didn't agree. He said that it was too risky. I should stand at the edge of the blood maple forest and try. If the Xinyuan sword is really useful, then it won't be too late to go forward. The fatty had always been rash and impulsive, but the words he said were wise. After I heard him, I immediately nodded in agreement. I followed his instructions and stepped into the blood maple forest. I wasn't in a hurry, but took out the Xinyuan sword and quietly waited for the blood spirit guards to appear. After a while, a blood mist quickly floated out from the depths of the blood maple forest. When it reached me, the blood mist constantly surged, and a tall blood spirit guard appeared. I took a deep breath. Without waiting for him to come close, I took the initiative to hold the Xinyuan sword and infuse my true essence into it. I raised my hand and swung it. A sword light shot towards the blood spirit guard. The blood spirit guard didn't move at first. Just when I was delighted and thought that he was afraid of the Xinyuan sword, the blood spirit guard moved. He waved the blood blade in his hand at a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye. Instantly, the Xinyuan sword's sword light was blocked. After that, the blood spirit guard stepped on the ground and brandished his blood blade as he charged at me. Although he was quite a distance away from me, his aura was firmly locked on my body. At that moment, I felt as though countless drops of blood were wrapping around me. My entire body felt heavy. I wanted to lift my leg to retreat, but my body wouldn't listen to me. Previously, I had only seen Ah Fu and Wu Yue fight with the blood spirit guard. I didn't think much of it when I watched from the side. Only when I personally faced the enemy did I know how difficult it was. I clenched my teeth and activated the power of the Heavenly Spirit 9 steps to finally break free. However, at that moment, the blood spirit guard had already appeared in front of me. The long and narrow blood blade in his hand was less than a meter away from the tip of my nose. Just now, I had used all my true essence to activate the Heavenly Spirit 9 steps to break free from the aura. At this moment, I had just used up all my energy and hadn't recovered yet. Facing the blood blade in front of me, I couldn't activate my true essence at all. Chapter 7:12. Just as I was panicking, a hand suddenly reached out from my side and grabbed my shoulder, pulling me backward. I remembered that I had listened to the fatty's suggestion and only stepped into the blood maple forest. The fatty must have realized that something was wrong and extended his hand to help me. Although the fatty had helped me, the speed at which he pulled me was far slower than the blood spirit guard. As I retreated, the blood blade in the blood spirit guard's hand was getting closer and closer to my nose. Luckily, when the fatty pulled me, the blood blade was still a meter away from me. In the end, just as the blood blade was about to stab into my body completely exited the blood maple forest. A barrier appeared in front of me. The blood blade stabbed into the barrier and instantly exploded, turning into a blood mist. After the blood blade exploded, the blood spirit guard's body reached the edge of the blood maple forest. He stood there with a blood mist covering his face. I couldn't see his expression, but I had a strange feeling that the blood spirit guard was staring at me. The blood mist started from the blood blade and gradually spread upwards. In the end, the blood spirit guard dissipated in front of me, turning back into a blood mist. I sat on the ground, panting heavily. My heart was filled with lingering fear. I was too rash just now. If I hadn't listened to the fatty's suggestion and stepped into the blood maple forest to test the waters, I would have followed in Daozi's footsteps and died in the blood maple forest. However, at the same time, I was a little confused. According to the information I had received, the blood spirit guard's power should be at the Yang spirit completion realm, similar to Fu's realm. With my current power, I naturally didn't have a chance of winning against Fu, but I wouldn't be forced into a desperate situation after one move. Compared to the blood spirit guard that Wu Yue had faced, the one that had just disappeared was obviously stronger. Could it be that I had made a mistake and brought the Xian Yuan sword with me. Not only was I unable to suppress the blood spirit guard that was born from Qi Yu's blood energy, but it had also stimulated the resentment deep in Qi Yu's heart, causing the blood spirit guard's power to skyrocket. My face darkened as I thought about it. My thoughts were simple, but I didn't expect them to backfire. The fat guy anxiously asked me, "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. He heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he started to complain about me, saying that I was too careless. I couldn't help but smile wryly. Usually, the fatty was the one who acted rashly and was scolded by me. I didn't think that there would be a day where I would be scolded by him. But I really didn't think it through just now and took it for granted. After listening to the fatty's reprimand, the three of us fell into silence. Facing this blood maple forest, he couldn't force his way through, nor could he rely on the power of the Xian Yuan sword. What could he do? Wu Yu was still immersed in grief and didn't say a word. Fatty didn't notice either. After a long moment of silence, another thought popped into my mind. Although I wasn't able to pass with the help of the Xian Yuan sword, it broadened my mind. If the Xian Yuan sword didn't work, what about the demon purification pot? Just like the Qi Yu axe, the demon refining gourd was a magical artifact that Qi Yu always carried with him. However, in terms of quality, the demon refining gourd was much more powerful than the Qi Yu axe. Lu Xingyang was able to make the blood spirit guards recognize him as their master with his Qi Yu axe. If I bring the demon purification gourd with me, what will the blood spirit guards think of me? As I thought of this, I was instantly energized. I hurriedly told the fatty about my idea. After listening to me, the fatty's eyebrows relaxed. However, he had always been cautious and said hesitantly, "Not necessarily. Look at the Qi Yu axe. Its name is related to Qi Yu, but the demon purification gourd doesn't seem to be related to Qi Yu. I don't think it will work." What kind of logic is that? I waved my hand in annoyance. Won't we know if it works or not after trying? Give me the demon purification gourd, and I'll try again. Hearing that, the fatty shook his head like a rattle drum. You almost died when you tried it just now. You want to try again? No, I'll go this time. Saying so, he took out the demon purification gourd and prepared to walk in. I quickly pulled him back. I was in danger just now because I wasn't prepared. In terms of strength and cultivation, I'm the most suitable person to go. This time, I promise to immediately retreat if the situation isn't right. Are you kidding me? The fatty didn't even have the strength of a heavenly seal master, and the demon purification gourd couldn't be used in Chiyo's tomb. If this method didn't work, the fatty wouldn't have a chance to escape. Saying so, I didn't wait for the fatty's objection and directly snatched the demon purification gourd back. The fatty didn't insist and only advised me to be more careful. After repeatedly agreeing, I walked to the edge of the blood maple forest and swallowed the Xian Yuan sword using the sword nurturing technique. Holding the demon purification gourd in my hand, I took a deep breath and walked into the blood maple forest. I was extremely vigilant and mobilized the true Yuan in my body. If the blood spirit guard attacked again, I would immediately run away. However, the situation this time was obviously different from the last time. After entering for a while, the blood mist in front of me was still calm and there weren't any blood spirit guards coming out. This situation instantly raised my spirits. I turned to the fatty and said, "The blood spirit guards didn't appear. This method will most likely work." The fatty was still cautious and shook his head. "Is it because you're too close? Take a few steps forward and see again." What he said made sense. I nodded and carefully took a few steps forward while paying attention to the surrounding situation. Even after I had walked several times further than I had previously, the surroundings were still calm. This time I was completely at ease. I turned to the fatty and said, "It's really fine. It should be the demon purification gourd." The worry on the fatty's face had also been swept away. He was so happy that he wanted to step in and meet up with me. However, I pondered for a moment and stopped him. I said to him and Wiyua, "Although the blood spirit guards didn't appear, we can't be completely sure whether the demon purification gourd is working or not. How about this? The two of you wait here while I take the demon purification gourd. If it's really as we thought, and the demon purification gourd is working and I successfully pass through, then the rules of this place will be broken. I'll send you a message then, and the two of you can follow me. If there are any changes along the way, the chances of me escaping will be much higher if I'm alone. Hearing what I said, the fatty instinctively wanted to refuse, but Wu Yue nodded. I should be the one to scout the way, but my body is currently weak and my cultivation is far from normal. I can only rely on Mr. Zhou. After saying that, she bowed to me, her expression filled with gratitude. Wu Yue had already agreed. Although the fatty was worried, it was indeed the best solution at the moment. After hesitating for a moment, he could only agree. After agreeing, I didn't hesitate anymore and continued to walk into the depths of the blood maple forest. As I walked forward, the blood fog in the blood maple forest became denser. I lifted my head to look up and saw that the dense blood fog had filled the air. I could only see the trunk of the surrounding maple trees, as the treetops had completely fused with the blood fog. At first glance, it was as though I had walked into a palace. The blood fog above was the roof, and the surrounding maple trees were the stone pillars. In this strange situation, I became increasingly cautious. With every step I took, I had to pay attention to my surroundings. At the same time, I constantly circulated the true yuan in my body so that I could escape at any time. After walking for another 15 minutes, according to the situation in Chiyu's shoulder mound, I should have reached the center of the blood maple forest. I relaxed a little. The blood spirit guards hadn't appeared yet, which meant that the monster refining gourd was working. Otherwise, I couldn't think of a reason why the blood spirit guards wouldn't appear. Just as I heaved a sigh of relief, an extremely thick maple tree suddenly appeared in front of me. The maple trees on the way were only as thick as a person, but the one in front of me was as thick as 10 adult men. It was as thick as dozens of other maple trees. Apart from being thick, the blood energy on this maple tree was much thicker than the other maple trees. Moreover, there was a faint fluctuation on the trunk, which looked extremely strange. Seeing this maple tree, I immediately became anxious. I stood at my original spot and carefully observed for a long time. After confirming that there was nothing abnormal, I slowly walked over to take a closer look. However, when I was around 3 meters away from the maple tree, a ripple spread out from the trunk. Before I could see clearly, a blood-red mist diffused out, and several tall, blood-red figures appeared in front of me. Chapter 7:13. When I saw the blood spirit guards appear, my face instantly paled. I subconsciously wanted to use my true yuan to escape, but before I could do anything, I froze on the spot. This time, there wasn't just one blood spirit guard, but 7 of them. We were already deep in the blood maple forest. I didn't have any confidence in escaping from a single blood spirit guard, let alone 7 of them. After seeing the situation clearly, the true yuan in my body instantly dissipated. I was stunned on the spot and didn't dare to move for a long time. Unexpectedly, I didn't move. The blood spirit guards didn't move either. They just quietly stood under the huge maple trees. Their 7 faces, which were shrouded in blood energy, faced me. They didn't move, nor did they do anything else. After a long time, I calmed down from my initial panic. I frowned and pondered for a while before gritting my teeth and raising the devil refining gourd. When the 7 blood spirit guards saw my action, they instantly reacted. The 7 blood-colored figures uniformly knelt down and deeply kowtowed towards the devil refining gourd. In an instant, my panic completely disappeared. It was just as I had imagined. The devil refining gourd was like Chiyu's axe, a relic of Chiyu. Not only would the blood spirit guards not attack, but they would also kneel down and worship it, allowing it to order them around. After calming down, I couldn't help but want to laugh out loud. Previously, at Chiyu's shoulder burial gourd, Lu Jinyang had controlled the blood spirit guards. Wang, Can, the fatty, and I had been on tenterhooks due to their might. I didn't expect that this time, with the devil refining gourd in hand, I would actually experience the thrill of commanding the blood spirit guards. It was a pity that Lu Jinyang wasn't here. Otherwise, just these 7 blood spirit guards would be enough to make him suffer. As I thought about this, I quickly realized another problem. Why were there 7 blood spirit guards? Previously, at the shoulder burial mound, there were a total of 9 of us. Afterwards, 9 blood spirit guards appeared, but this time, there were only me, Wiyue, and Fatty who entered the head burial mound. Logically speaking, there should be 3 blood spirit guards. Could it be that someone else had secretly entered this place? As soon as I thought about this, I immediately shook my head as I felt that it was impossible. It was different from the shoulder burial gourd. This place was much more hidden than the Juyi tomb. Moreover, the ghost generals of the ancient battlefield were protecting it. After entering, there was the 10 absolute ancient formation. We had experienced many dangers along the way, and Wu Yue was very familiar with this place. If there were other people who came here, they might not even be able to make it through the ancient battlefield. They would all be fed to the Een spirit generals. After pondering for a while, I ruled out this possibility and stopped thinking about it. I reached out my hand and pointed at the demon refining gourd, signaling the blood spirit guard to lead the way. I didn't know what these blood spirit guards were, but with just a single action of mine, they actually understood. The 7 blood-red figures simultaneously stood up, lined up, and strode forward with large strides. As they were tall, their pace was naturally fast. I had no choice but to quicken my pace to keep up with them. In the blood maple forest, the only dangerous thing was the blood spirit guards. Now that the blood spirit guards were all under my command, I didn't have to be on tenterhooks like before. I felt much more relaxed and quickened my pace to follow behind the blood spirit guards. Originally, it had taken me 15 minutes to cover half of the distance. However, it only took me a quarter of the time to reach the foot of the small mountain behind the blood maple forest. Previously, in Juyi County, there was a tall and mighty Chiyu statue at the back of the blood maple forest. However, it was different here. There was no Chiyu statue, but there were statues of the 81 monsters that we had seen in the 10 absolute ancient formation. They stood with their backs facing the blood maple forest. Their bodies were hunched as if they were welcoming something. A long stone path separated the 81 statues in the middle. The stone path curved and led to the small mountain not far away. Finally, it disappeared in front of a cave on the mountainside. The scenery of the 2 Chiyo's tombs began to change. I couldn't use the situation on the other side of the Jinjiu mound to estimate the situation in front of me. But, as far as I could see, there were no other sceneries except for this cave. Therefore, I didn't need to think too much to know that everything was in that inconspicuous small cave in front of me. My next step was definitely to go there. Of course, although I was excited, I wasn't in a hurry to go there. The Fatty and Wu Yue were still waiting for my news on the other side of the blood maple forest. At this moment, 2 vibrations came from Xiang Lu's leather pouch. It was a message from the sound transmitting talisman. It was obvious that the Fatty was anxious and wanted to ask me about the situation. I heaved a sigh of relief and took out the sound transmitting talisman from Xiang Lu's leather pouch. After circulating my true essence, the Fatty's message appeared on the talisman. Third baby, how was the situation? Did you encounter the blood spirit guards? This fellow is really impatient. I chuckled and was about to reply to him, but right at that moment, the white light screen of the sound transmitting talisman shook again. The Fatty's second message came through. Third baby, it's not good. Senior Wu Yue found that someone is coming. It seems to be the people of Mount Longhu. They haven't come yet, but Senior Wu Yue said that they are very strong. We can't resist them. Are you done? We have nowhere to hide. We can only enter the blood maple forest. I was stunned when I saw this message. Someone is really coming? How could the people of Mount Longhu come here? How could the Een souls and ghost generals on the ancient battlefield and the black smoke that appeared after the 10 terminal formation was broken? Just as these doubts appeared in my mind, I instantly understood. Wu Yue's husband, Daozi, was originally from Mount Longhu. Since he could come here, it meant that Mount Longhu definitely had information about this place. The Kuei ox sacrificial altar and the heaven-measuring ruler that the couple used were most likely obtained from Mount Longhu. Since they could come here, it wasn't strange for the people of Mount Longhu to come here. Thinking of this, I felt helpless. I hadn't expected that there would be people from Mount Longhu eyeing us covetously. However, it wasn't a big deal. The people from Mount Longhu were at most at the Yang Spirit Complete realm. Moreover, there wouldn't be many of them. With the Blood Spirit guards around, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Without further ado, I hurriedly sent the situation of me breaking through the blood maple forest to the fatty and the others through the sound-transmitting talisman. I told them to directly enter the blood maple forest and not to delay on the way. They should just go straight through, and I would wait here. After sending this message, I was about to send them the news that the Blood Spirit Guards had already pledged allegiance to me and tell them not to worry. However, before I could act, the white light screen shook again. It was the fatty's third message. Third baby, the people from Mount Longhu have arrived in front of the Blood Maple Forest and discovered us. Moreover, not only have the 3 Yang God Celestial Masters from Mount Longhu come, but Lu Xingyang has also come. He and the people from Mount Longhu seem to have reached some kind of agreement. They have joined hands and chased after us. Senior Wu Yue and I have already entered the Blood Maple Forest. They are following behind us and have already entered. When I saw this message, I was stunned. Lu Xingyang, how is this possible? Previously, outside the 10-terminal formation, I clearly saw Lu Xingyang on his last breath. If it wasn't for the power of the 10-terminal formation, I would have killed him. How long has it been? How did Lu Xingyang escape? How did he join hands with the people from Mount Longhu? A series of questions appeared in my mind. In the blink of an eye, I thought of the answer. Wu Yu was able to use the power of the 10-terminal formation to trap Lu Xingyang there. It was very likely that the people from Mount Longhu also had some understanding of the 10-terminal formation. It was very likely that the people from Mount Longhu came in and released Lu Xingyang. Although the two of them had enmity, Lu Xingyang had always been cunning. I don't know what methods he had used to deceive the celestial masters of Mount Longhu. Not only did they not pursue the previous enmity, but they had also formed an alliance. This person is really haunting me like a ghost. I even felt discouraged. Lu Xingyang had said that my luck was always good, but in comparison, I felt that his luck was even better. No matter what kind of danger he encountered, he would eventually escape and even gain something. It was really like the saying, good people don't live long, but scourges live for 1,000 years. I took a deep breath and suppressed the discouragement in my heart. I thought about the situation in front of me. It was obvious that the situation was very, very bad. Although I could control the 7 Blood Spirit Guards, Lu Xingyang also had the Qiyu axe. It was hard to say who the Blood Spirit Guards would listen to. Moreover, even if the Blood Spirit Guards listened to me and joined hands to deal with Lu Xingyang, it wouldn't be difficult to deal with the 3 Yang God Celestial Masters of Mount Longhu. However, if Lu Xingyang and the 3 Celestial Masters of Mount Longhu joined hands, it would be hard to say if the 7 Blood Spirit Guards could deal with them. As my mind was in a mess, I didn't send a message to the fatty. Instead, I turned around and rushed into the Blood Maple Forest. With the fatty and Wu Yue's strength, they wouldn't be able to escape from Lu Xingyang and the 3 Yang God Celestial Masters. I had to support them. Following my movements, the 7 Blood Spirit Guards also followed. I hesitated and didn't order them to go back. Chapter 714. As I had just walked through the Blood Maple Forest, I was very familiar with the surroundings. After entering, I rushed forward at full speed. The 7 Blood Spirit Guards followed closely behind me, leaving a long trail of blood behind me. Originally, the Blood Maple Forest wasn't that long. Moving at full speed, it took me less than 15 minutes to reach the huge maple tree where I had met the Blood Spirit Guards. This should be the center of the Blood Maple Forest. Just as I was about to continue forward, there was movement in front of me. I raised my head and saw 2 figures moving through the forest. As they moved forward, they looked around cautiously. Weren't they the fatty and Wu Yue? Compared to when we parted, the fatty didn't change much, but Wu Yue was in a sorry state. Her hair was in a mess, and her clothes weren't neat. It was obvious that she had experienced a fierce battle. Even so, She was still holding Daozi's corpse tightly, not letting it get hurt. I looked into the distance. There wasn't any movement behind them. Lu Jinyang shouldn't be chasing after us. I heaved a sigh of relief and hurried forward. Before I could be cautious, the two of them had already noticed the movement here. They didn't look at me, but at the 7 blood spirit guards. They instantly stopped in their tracks with a panicked expression. However, when they saw me standing in front of the blood spirit guards, the panic on their faces turned into confusion. It was obvious that they didn't understand why I was with the blood spirit guards. The fatty was the first to run over. He pointed at the blood spirit guards and asked, "Third baby, what's going on?" I briefly told the fatty about using the devil refining gourd to control the blood spirit guards. When Lu Jinyang used the Chiyu axe to control the blood spirit guards in Chiyo's shoulder mound, the fatty was also there. Thus, he didn't need me to explain to him. He immediately understood and was delighted. Since the blood spirit guards are following orders, they should be able to stop Lu Jinyang and the celestial masters from Dragon Tiger Mountain, right? I shook my head. Not necessarily. Lu Jinyang already had the power to deal with the blood spirit guards when he was in Juyi. Now that his cultivation has increased, even though the blood spirit guards are strong, it will still be difficult for them to deal with him. Moreover, he has the Chiyu axe. I'm not sure if the blood spirit guards will make a move. Only then did the fatty realize the problem. The smile on his face disappeared, and he asked me with a bitter face, "Then what do we do now?" I pondered for a moment before replying, "It doesn't matter if it's possible or not. Let's leave the blood spirit guards here and order them to obstruct Lu Jinyang's group. We'll continue forward and avoid meeting them for the time being." The fatty naturally listened to me, and Wu Yu didn't have any objections. Thus, I raised the monster refining gourd in my hand and said to the 7 blood spirit guards, "Guard this place. Apart from the 3 of us, kill anyone who enters Blood Maple Forest." After saying that, the 7 blood spirit guards knelt on the ground. It was unknown whether they understood or not. The situation was urgent, and I didn't have time to do anything else. I brought the fatty and Wu Yue forward and headed for the exit. After moving forward for a distance, I turned around and saw that the blood spirit guards didn't follow us. They should have understood my order. I heaved a sigh of relief and asked about the situation with Lu Jinyang and Mount Longhu. The fatty told me that an hour after I entered the Blood Maple Forest, just as he was anxiously asking me about the situation, the 3 Yang God Celestial Masters and Lu Jinyang from Dragon Tiger Mountain suddenly appeared from behind. After seeing them, they immediately walked over. Lu Jinyang was obviously concerned about the monster refining gourd. He stared at the fatty and was about to make a move to force the fatty to hand over the monster refining gourd. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, Wu Yue immediately went forward and fought with Lu Jinyang. As for the 3 Yang God Celestial Masters of Mount Longhu, it was obvious that they had come for Wu Yue. However, the strange thing was that they didn't make a move. Instead, they saw Wu Yue continuously retreating under Lu Jinyang's hands. They even advised Lu Jinyang to stop. The people of Mount Longhu and Lu Jinyang obviously had some sort of agreement. Although Lu Jinyang was arrogant, seeing that the fatty and Wu Yue didn't have the power to resist, he didn't force them and stopped. Seizing this chance, the fatty grabbed Wu Yue and rushed into Blood Maple Forest. He sent a message to me as he braced himself and rushed forward. I didn't know if Lu Jinyang and the Celestial Masters of Mount Longhu were afraid of the Blood Spirit Guards, or if they thought that they were going to catch a turtle in a jar, so they didn't chase too much. That was why they managed to escape here and successfully met up with me. After listening to the fatty, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Starting from the Yinshang Royal Tomb, Lu Jinyang had killed many Celestial Masters of Mount Longhu, including the younger brother of the current Celestial Master Zhang. Mount Longhu had actually let go of such a huge grudge and joined hands with him. From this, it could be seen that Mount Longhu had a big plan. It was a pity that they didn't know that they were asking a tiger for its skin. Although Mount Longhu was powerful, Lu Jinyang wasn't a reasonable person. I knew this better than anyone else. However, what was Mount Longhu seeking this time? If they really succeeded in the end, it would only benefit Lu Jinyang. While I was thinking, we had already passed through half of Blood Maple Forest and arrived at the group of statues outside. After arriving here, the fatty exclaimed in surprise. It was obvious that he had also noticed that this place was different from the Zephyr Mound. He turned to look around. On the other hand, Wiyue lifted his head and looked at the cave guarded by the statues. He suddenly put down Daozi's skeleton and lifted his head to look at me. Mr. Zhou, I have a favor to ask. I was stunned. Before I could react, Wiyue continued. The cave in front should be where we are going next. According to what my husband said earlier, his soul should be in there. The thing that Mr. Zhou is looking for should also be in there. Both of you, please take my husband's corpse with you and continue forward. If there is a chance to escape from this place, I only ask that Mr. Zhou take my husband's soul and corpse with you. As for me, I will stay here and do my best to stop the enemies behind me. She had said so much in one breath, so she must have made up her mind. However, I didn't understand. Daozi's soul was clearly in front of us. If she continued forward, she would be able to reunite with her husband very soon. Why did she suddenly choose to give up? I looked at Wiyue and was about to ask her what was going on, but Wiyue spoke again. Don't try to persuade me, Mr. Zhou. The people from Mount Longhu are here with that thing. As long as it's here, I won't be able to escape. I don't want the Taoist priest to see me in such a sorry state. You should leave quickly. Although the blood spirit guards are magical, they won't be able to stop Lu Jinyang for long. That thing? What thing? Could it be that Mount Longhu had specially prepared a magic tool to deal with Wiyue? Why did her expression become so miserable when she mentioned that thing? I looked at Wiyue and hesitated. To be honest, although I didn't understand what she meant, it would be best for the fatty and I if she stopped us. It was just that since we were traveling together, there was some friendship between us. I didn't want Wiyue to get hurt. Seeing that I couldn't make up my mind, Wiyue smiled bitterly and said, I'm already satisfied that I've come this far. My purpose for coming here is to see my husband again. Now that my goal has been achieved, I have nothing to worry about. Moreover, returning to Mount Longhu is my destiny. Mr. Zhou, please hurry up and don't care about me anymore. If you delay any longer, Lu Jinyang and the people from Mount Longhu will catch up. I'm afraid you won't be able to leave, even if you want to. Wiyue's face was full of sorrow, but her words were resolute. I knew that I couldn't persuade her. Just as I was about to grit my teeth and leave, the fatty suddenly turned around and walked towards the 81 statues behind him. Fatty, what are you doing? I asked subconsciously when I saw the fatty's movements. The fatty didn't look back. He had already walked into the bluestone path in the group of statues. He didn't stop and replied as he walked, Senior Wiyue is too pessimistic. We came in together, so let's go down together. Third baby, don't you see that there are so many statues here? I want to set up another 10 terminal formation here. After the people from Mount Longhu and Lu Jinyang break through Blood Maple Forest, I'll trap them here. I don't know how they broke through the 10 terminal formation outside, but they must have used a magic tool like the measuring sky ruler. I want to see if they have the magic explosion to break through the formation again. 10 terminal formation? I was stunned when I heard that. Then I reacted and said in surprise, you know how to set up the 10 terminal formation? I was in disbelief. It was obviously the fatty's first time seeing the 10 terminal formation. After studying it for a short while, he actually mastered the 10 terminal formation. Here my question, the fatty shook his head. I didn't really master it. However, the principle of the 10 terminal formation is actually very simple. The difficult part is the materials used to set up the formation. These statues in front of me are natural materials. I don't need to prepare and refine them. I can use them directly. So, it's not difficult to set up the 10 terminal formation. So that's how it is. Fatty, this fellow, was really a genius in array formations. Although he said it in a simple manner, I knew that the details were definitely not simple. Chapter 7:15. The fat man's words stunned Wiyue, who was determined to die. She stood there for a long time without any reaction. Only when I spoke up and persuaded her to bring Daozi's corpse with me to protect the fat man did Wu Yue react. She picked up Daozi's corpse and didn't mention what had just happened. She walked with me to the fat man's side. It was obvious that Wu Yue didn't want to give up hope if she had a choice. This made me even more curious about the item she had just mentioned. I tried to ask her. Wu Yue shook her head with a wry smile. It was obvious that she didn't want to talk about it. Since she didn't want to talk about it, I couldn't do anything about it. I put the question aside and turned to look at the fat man. He had already started moving. He walked back and forth among the 81 bronze statues. Sometimes he moved the statues, and sometimes he bent down and drew something on the ground. He looked very confident. Time passed. There was a faint movement in the blood maple forest. I didn't know if Lu Jinyang and the others had started fighting with the blood spirit guards. My heart tightened, seeing that the fat man hadn't finished yet. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes to adjust my breathing to recover the true qi in my body that had been consumed. I didn't know when Lu Jinyang and the others would appear. Our only hope was the fat man's formation. If Lu Jinyang and the others came before the fat man's formation was completed, we could only rely on Wu Yue and me to stop them and create time for the fat man. While I closed my eyes to adjust my breathing, Wu Yue's face stiffened. She clenched her fists as if she had recalled some unbearable memory and was ready to attack at any time. I didn't know how much time had passed, but there was a sudden movement at the exit of the blood maple forest. My heart tightened. I opened my eyes and looked up. A skinny figure walked out of the forest. It was Lu Jinyang. He was still wearing a silver mask, and his body was much thinner than before. He didn't look much different from when he was bound by the 10-terminal formation. However, he held the Qiyu axe in his hand, and his body was surging with blood energy. It was obvious that he had experienced a fierce battle. It wasn't hard to guess that the blood spirit guards had attacked him. Unfortunately, 7 blood spirit guards at the peak of Yang spirit realm couldn't do anything to him. I couldn't help but feel discouraged. Only half a day had passed since they left the 10-terminal formation. Not only had Lu Jinyang escaped from danger, even his strength hadn't been affected at all. Moreover, he had even caught up to them. This was simply unbelievable. After coming out of the blood maple forest, Lu Jinyang's expression was very calm. He raised his hand and put away the Qiyu axe in his hand. He raised his eyes and saw Wu Yue and me. Astonishment flashed in his eyes behind the silver mask, but it immediately turned into mockery. He said with a smile, "You two are really together? But Zhou-Yi, I still have to thank you. I called you here to break the formation here. Although there were some changes, you still broke the formation. Thank you very much." I didn't know what he was up to, so I shook my head and said, "Although the 10-terminal formation has been broken, the entrance is still blocked by a mass of black smoke. You were able to come in because of your own ability. There's no need to thank me. Lu Jinyang's strength isn't something we can deal with. What Wu Yue and I have to do now is to stall for as much time as possible for Fatty. So, it couldn't be better that Lu Jinyang didn't choose to attack immediately. I tried to speak slowly and stall for time, unhurriedly. Lu Jinyang obviously didn't know what I was planning. After hearing what I said, he immediately shook his head. "You don't have to be modest." I followed the people from Dragon Tiger Mountain in. Although the people from Dragon Tiger Mountain have a method to enter this place, they can't use it without breaking the 10-terminal formation. So, you guys played a key role in breaking the formation. I see. I nodded. Then, you don't have to thank me. It was Fatty who broke the formation. You should thank him. However, he has already taken the monster refining gourd from you as payment for his labor. So, you guys are even. Lu Jinyang smiled playfully and nodded, as though he agreed with what I said. He didn't continue talking about the previous matter, but pointed at the cave in front of us and said, "Since you've already passed through the blood maple forest, why didn't you continue forward? Could it be that you're waiting for me to move forward together?" After saying that, he glanced at Fatty, who was standing among the statues. Without waiting for me to reply, he continued, "Oh, so there's another formation here. Lin who should be breaking the formation, right? Not bad. With you guys in charge of breaking the formation, I'm at ease. How about this? He broke 2 formations consecutively, which helped me a lot. After he breaks the formation, I'll only kill the two of you and spare his life. What do you think? I frowned and ignored the second half of his sentence. I only thought about the first half of his sentence. At that moment, Fatty seemed to have activated a part of the formation. Among the 81 statues, the formation's aura had already started to fluctuate. It was reasonable for Lu Xingyang to mistake Fatty for breaking the formation. I was just stalling for time. Hearing what he said, I was happy to go with the flow. I nodded and mocked. Then, I'll thank you for your kindness on behalf of Fatty. Lu Xingyang smiled and nodded. That's easy. Afterwards, the atmosphere became quiet again. I continued to adjust my breathing to recover the true essence in my body. From time to time, I would look back to check on Fatty's progress. As he continued to move among the statues, the aura of the formation became denser. I didn't know how long it would be able to fool Lu Xingyang for. At that moment, Lu Xingyang's gaze wasn't on Fatty's body. He didn't continue to stare at me either. Instead, he raised his head and stared at the small cave that was guarded by many statues. His eyes flashed, and I didn't know what he was thinking about. Since this place was Chiyo's tomb, combined with what I had seen and heard at the shoulder burial mound, Lu Xingyang's goal on this trip was most likely to be Chiyo's complete inheritance. This inheritance must be very important to him. That's why, after he appeared, he didn't take any drastic measures against me and Wu Yue. Instead, he thought that Fatty was breaking the formation. His mentality is very beneficial to us. As long as Fatty can successfully set up the 10-terminal formation and stop Lu Xingyang, he can only watch helplessly as we continue to move forward. The silent atmosphere lasted for a long time. It was only when the 3 young god celestial masters from Dragon Tiger Mountain arrived that the silence was broken. It was different from what I had imagined. The 3 celestial masters from Dragon Tiger Mountain weren't the old men from before, but 2 old men and 1 young man. The 2 old men were quite old, so it was normal for them to be at the young god celestial master realm. The other one looked to be less than 30 years old. To be able to cultivate to the young god celestial master realm at such a young age, it could be seen how deep the foundation of Dragon Tiger Mountain was. What was even more unbelievable was that among the 3 celestial masters from Dragon Tiger Mountain, the young man's cultivation was the highest. He was at the young god celestial master realm. The other 2 old men were also at the late stage of the young god celestial master realm. They were very close to the young god celestial master realm. Just these 3 people alone were not a small force in the Blessed Enclave. It was no wonder that Dragon Tiger Mountain didn't participate in the matters of the Blessed Enclave. They didn't care about the status of one of the 72 Blessed Enclave at all. After the Celestial Masters from Dragon Tiger Mountain appeared, Wu Yu became nervous. His hands kept shaking, and his eyes flashed with resentment. Even his breathing became faster. After the 3 Celestial Masters from Dragon Tiger Mountain appeared, their eyes focused on Wu Yu. Among them, the young god Celestial Master, who had white hair and beard and was obviously the oldest, seemed to be acquainted with Wu Yu. He was the first to walk in front of us. He didn't attack, but tried to persuade Wu Yu. Wu Yu, give up. You can't escape from our control. So many years have passed. Listen to me and return to the mountain. Return to the mountain? I frowned as I listened. Isn't Wu Yu a ghost? Return to what mountain? Dragon Tiger Mountain? I didn't understand. The people of Dragon Tiger Mountain always hated evil. When faced with ghosts, their attitude was to get rid of them as soon as possible. Moreover, there was a story between Wu Yu and their Taoist. Since the people of Dragon Tiger Mountain had found him, why didn't they kill him directly? Instead, they persuaded him to return to the mountain? What did they mean? Wu Yu didn't seem surprised by his words. He lowered his head and was silent for a while. With a mocking expression, he shook his head. Return to the mountain? It's been so many years. Don't you understand? I can't go back. The old Celestial Master's voice rose. Why are you so stubborn? The Celestial Master has already given the order. You and Chuan Yu can't be together. Wu Yu raised his head and looked at the old Celestial Master. His voice became very firm. Whether we can be together or not is our business. What does it have to do with Dragon Tiger Mountain? What does it have to do with Celestial Master Zhang? Chapter 716. From their conversation, I could vaguely feel that the celestial masters of Mount Longhu didn't care about Wu Yu's husband, who was Daozi back then. Instead, their attention was focused on Wu Yu, as though her identity was more important than Daozi's. This made me even more confused. Daozi was an existence that was only inferior to Celestial Master Zhang in Mount Longhu. Wu Yu was just a woman, and she had a soul body. Why would the people of Mount Longhu pay so much attention to her? While I was puzzled, Lu Jinyang seemed to see through my thoughts. He chuckled and said to me, "Zhou Yi, you followed her all the way. Don't tell me you still don't know her identity?" I didn't know what Lu Jinyang meant. I turned to look at Wu Yu. Seeing that she didn't have any reaction, I nodded. Lu Jinyang smiled again. "Interesting. Her identity is not simple. Previously, when I was captured by her, I thought that I was too careless. Only after I heard of her identity did I realize that I could not blame myself for being careless. It was because her methods were indeed extraordinary." After sighing, Lu Jinyang continued with a teasing tone, "Let me tell you a story. About 100 years ago, the Daozi of Mount Longhu disappeared for no reason. The soul of their divine weapon, Fushi Zither, also disappeared. Because of this, Mount Longhu once launched a large-scale hunt throughout the country. They also released news that as long as they could provide information about the Daozi and the spirit, Mount Longhu was willing to agree to a request from the other party without crossing the bottom line. Once this news came out, it caused quite a commotion in the secular metaphysics world. Countless metaphysical families were sent out to search, but after several years, Mount Longhu didn't find any valuable clues. In the end, this matter was left unsettled. 100 years passed in a hurry. Until today, Mount Longhu finally found a clue. I listened in a daze. Although Lu Jinyang didn't mention Wu Yu, how could I not know her identity based on what Wu Yu had said? A huge wave rose in my heart. The Fushi Zither was the same as the Xinyuan sword in my hand and the Fatty's devil refining gourd. It was one of the 10 great ancient divine weapons. It was said that the heavenly sovereign Fushi had used jade and heavenly silk to create a musical instrument. Its entire body glowed with a gentle white light. The sound of the zither could make people feel peaceful and peaceful. It was said that it had a mysterious power that could control the minds of all living things. No wonder Wu Yu could deceive me with the incubus technique. No wonder she could play the zither in the air when facing the enemy. No wonder her zither music could bewitch people's minds. Even Lu Jinyang and the bronze statue in the 10-terminal formation were affected. It turned out that all the mysteries were here. It was no wonder that the people from Dragon Tiger Mountain had not mentioned a single word about Daozi ever since they appeared. Instead, they had been focusing on Wu Yue and forcing her to return. After all, no matter how high a Daoist status in Longhu Mountain was, he was just an ordinary person. No matter how talented he was, if he lost one, a new one could be chosen. How could it compare to the importance of a divine weapon? While I was still thinking, the young man with the highest status among the 3 celestial masters of Dragon Tiger Mountain seemed to be a little impatient. He waved his right hand and said to "You demon, you've escaped from Dragon Tiger Mountain for so many years. Do you really think you can live freely outside? What does Dragon Tiger Mountain have to do with you?" "Oomph. The Fushi Zither is on the mountain. Where can you escape to? Li Chunshu, don't waste your breath. Take her down." After he gave the order, the old celestial master, named Li Chunshu, obviously didn't want to use force on Wu Yue. He didn't make a move. Instead, he turned around and comforted, "Taoist, you mustn't. Wu Yue is the soul of the Fushi Zither. If we use force, so what if we capture her? The power of the Fushi Zither will still be greatly reduced." I was stunned when I heard how he addressed me. Then, I realized that this young man was actually the new Taoist of Dragon Tiger Mountain. It was no wonder that his cultivation had reached the peak of the Yang spirit realm at such a young age. The Taoist of Dragon Tiger Mountain was indeed extraordinary. Wu Yue's husband was probably a peerless figure in the past. After Li Chunshu finished speaking, before Taoist could speak, another celestial master who looked slightly younger than Li Chunshu said, Li Chunshu, don't think that I don't know what you're planning. When the sinner escaped from Dragon Tiger Mountain with the Fushi Zither, you were the person in charge of guarding Dragon Tiger Mountain. Moreover, back then, you had a close relationship with the sinner and Wu Yue. You're not acting like this to protect the divine artifact. You're just afraid of hurting your old relationship. After hearing his words, Wu Yue obviously didn't want to put his old friend in a difficult position. He sighed and said to Li Chunshu, you don't have to help me anymore, old Li. When the Taoist and I decided to escape, we knew that this would happen. Since you're already here, let's do it. After saying that, without waiting for Li Chunshu's reaction, Wu Yue waved his right hand and drew a series of sharp explosions in the air. He had actually attacked first. Wu Yue's attack was very sudden. After the sound wave left her hands, it did not fall on Li Chunshu, who was closest to her. Instead, it attacked the other old celestial master who had attacked Li Chunshu just now. This attack was launched by Wu Yue with anger. Although the old man was also at the late stage of the Yang spirit realm, he was unable to react in time when faced with Wu Yue's sudden attack. He took the attack head-on and retreated repeatedly. After the successful attack, Wu Yue did not stop. Instead, she took advantage of her advantage and continued to attack. Her hands moved again, and wave after wave of sound attacks were launched outwards one after another. The celestial master of Dragon Tiger Mountain finally reacted and said angrily, Wu Yue, don't be complacent. I respect you as an elder, so I held back. Since you attacked first shamelessly, don't blame me for being rude. After saying that, he waved his hands and shattered the sound wave. This person was shameless. He had spoken ill of Wu Yue from the beginning and even said that he respected Wu Yue's identity. Fortunately, his words did not receive a response from Wu Yue. He only received waves of attacks from Wu Yue that were stronger than the previous one. Wu Yue's cultivation was one realm higher than his, and she had the upper hand in this exchange. Under the continuous attacks, the old celestial master could not hold on any longer. After a few moves, he showed signs of defeat. The young Taoist to the side could not sit still anymore. It seemed that he was limited by his status and did not attack personally. Instead, he shouted at Li Chunshu, Li Chunshu, what are you waiting for? After receiving the Taoist's order, Li Chunshu looked troubled. He first glanced at the Taoist, then at Wu Yue. Then, he gritted his teeth and joined the battle. Although Li Chunshu's cultivation was the same as the old celestial masters, both of them were only slightly inferior to Wu Yue. In addition, Wu Yue was not in a good state at the moment. The situation gradually began to balance out, and neither side could do anything to the other. Wu Yue said that the people from Dragon Tiger Mountain had brought something to restrain her, which was why they looked like they were going to die a martyr's death. However, the item had not appeared since they started fighting. It seemed that the people from Dragon Tiger Mountain did not dare to force Wu Yue into a corner. They were temporarily in a stalemate, but it was a good thing for me. I turned to look at the fatty. At that moment, the aura of the array formation on the fatty's side was getting stronger. If this dragged on for a little longer, the fatty would be able to succeed. Just as I was watching happily, the young Taoist was a little anxious. He looked up at Wu Yue, who was fighting the two of them, and said coldly, I advise you not to resist anymore. Do you really want to take out the Fushi Zither? The Fushi Zither should be what Wu Yue had said was specially used to deal with her, right? It made sense. Wu Yue was the soul of the Fushi Zither. He was born from the Fushi Zither, so he would naturally be restrained by it. After the Taoist finished speaking, Wu Yue still did not react. He sneered coldly and raised his hand to take out something that looked like a zither. It was the Fushi Zither. The moment the Fushi Zither appeared, Wu Yue and the two celestial masters immediately stopped. Li Chunshu could not bear to see this. He looked at Wu Yue and asked, Wu Yue, have you really decided? Wu Yue placed his hands behind his back and glanced at Li Chunshu. He did not say anything and only nodded. At that moment, the Taoist had already raised the zither in his hand. I did not know what he had done, but the light around us dimmed. Countless dark clouds gathered above Wu Yue's head, and lightning snakes surged out. Heavenly lightning. Chapter 717. Under the power of the Fushi Zither, Wu Yu is naturally restrained. Even if she wasn't restrained, she wouldn't be able to deal with it in her current weak state. Seeing that the lightning was about to fall, I subconsciously took a step forward, preparing to help Wu Yu deal with the lightning summoned by the Fushi Zither. However, at that moment, Lu Jinyang also took a step forward and blocked in front of me. I was forced to stop and looked up at Lu Jinyang angrily. However, Lu Jinyang didn't react to my gaze. His gaze was still playful as he said slowly, "Although I don't think highly of these cowards from Mount Longhu, I have an agreement with them. After entering Chiyo's tomb, they will help me obtain Chiyo's inheritance, and I will help them bring back the Fushi Zither soul. So, it's better for you to stay at the side and not interfere." I took a deep breath and didn't continue to attack. Lu Jinyang's cultivation wasn't something I could deal with. Since he had stopped me, I couldn't help Wu Yu at all. She could only rely on herself. Just as Lu Jinyang finished speaking, Wu Yu also moved. She raised her hands and waved them like before, but this time, with the movement of her hands, the image of a zither that was enshrouded in white light slowly appeared above Wu Yu's head. The zither's body glowed with a treasured light, and it looked exactly the same as the Fushi Zither in Taoist child's hand. The illusory white light seemed to be very slow, but before the lightning struck, it completely blocked Wu Yu's head. In the next second, the lightning whistled down and collided with the illusory white light. However, there was no movement and it disappeared as if it had been swallowed by the illusory white light. Seeing this, I couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Although Wu Yu said that she had no chance against the Fushi Zither, from the looks of the situation, she wasn't completely powerless to protect herself. As I relaxed, Taoist's eyes narrowed and he blurted out, "As expected of the Zither soul, it can actually transform into the Fushi Zither and borrow its power." After saying that, he sneered and continued, "I've held the Fushi Zither for many years, but I've never seen the power of the Fushi Zither with the Zither soul. It seems that it didn't disappoint me. Li Chunshu, take out the zither case." Following his order, the expression of the white-haired Li Chunshu instantly changed. He revealed an expression of reluctance, but he did not dare to disobey the Taoist's words. He extended his hand and swiped his wrist. Then a pitch-black zither case appeared in his hand. Seeing this zither case, Wu Yu's face paled. Although I didn't know what this zither case was used for, just looking at Wu Yu's face, I knew that this item would suppress her even more. I couldn't help but worry again. Because of Lu Jinyang's obstruction, I couldn't help but turn my head to look at the fatty. At this moment, the formation power within the statues was becoming increasingly obvious. Moreover, I could see that there were 6 Nine Palaces great formations that had been completed. Compared to before, the fatty's speed had obviously increased a lot. As long as Wu Yue could hold on for a while longer, when the fatty finished setting up the formation, we would be able to get rid of Lu Jinyang and the Taoist priest of Mount Longhu and enter the cave behind us. Imagination was beautiful, but reality was often unsatisfactory. After Li Chunshu took out the zither case, the Taoist reached out to take it and threw it into the air. When it was in Li Chunshu's hand, the pitch-black zither case looked no more than half a meter long, but after it was thrown into the air by the Taoist, the zither case quickly expanded. In the end, it grew into the shape of a coffin and stood erect above the Taoist's head. At the same time, the Taoist closed his eyes and formed a seal in front of his chest. His lips kept moving, obviously activating the zither case. At this time, Wu Yue was still controlling the Fushi Zither phantom, but he didn't move. He just stared blankly at the huge zither case in the air. I didn't know if he was waiting for the Taoist to make the first move or if he had already given up in despair. I was burning with anxiety and turned to look at the fatty again. At this time, he seemed to have encountered some trouble. He stopped in front of a statue and pressed his hands on the statue. I didn't know what he was doing. At this moment, the Taoist suddenly opened his eyes. There seemed to be a divine light in his eyes as he stared at Wu Yue and shouted, "Fushi zither, return." With this shout, the coffin-like zither case above his head suddenly shook. After a while, the lid of the zither case suddenly fell off. Following that, a majestic force crawled out of the zither case like an octopus in the deep sea, waving its pitch-black tentacles and landing on Wu Yue's body. At this time, Wu Yue finally moved. Her white and slender fingers stroked the Fushi zither phantom, picking and rubbing, sliding and trembling. In an instant, she changed countless movements, so much so that her hands became phantom and couldn't be seen at all. Following her movements, from within the Fushi zither, sounds were gradually emitted, from slow to rapid. At first it was clear and crisp. After a moment, it became the sound of horses galloping. There was no rhyme or reason to it, but it was able to excite the emotions of the people around. Behind her, countless giant hands holding swords appeared, like 1,000-armed guanyin, confronting the coffin-sized zither case from afar. The pitch-black tentacles crossed the sky like snakes and landed in front of Wu Yue. Wu Yue didn't show any weakness. She slashed with her right hand, and the strings of the Fushi zither clanged under her hand. She drove the numerous giant arms behind her to meet it. In terms of cultivation, Wu Yue wasn't inferior to the Taoist. The giant hand holding the sword was also very imposing. In fact, in my opinion, it had the power to suppress the pitch-black tentacles. However, the strange thing was that after the two sides came into contact, the pitch-black tentacles were like a soldering iron falling into the snow. They broke countless giant hands and went straight for Wu Yue. Wu Yue actually didn't have the slightest ability to resist. No wonder Wu Yue looked so desperate earlier. The restraining power of the tentacles didn't give Wu Yue a chance to resist at all. Wu Yue's figure retreated continuously, and the movements of her hands became faster and faster. Following her movements, more and more giant hands holding swords appeared. Each giant hand carried the aura of a peak yang god. They were extremely powerful, but no matter how many there were, they couldn't resist this natural suppression. The pitch-black tentacles continued to move forward, but their speed had slowed down slightly. If this continued, Wu Yue would definitely have no chance at all. I became even more anxious and turned to look at the fatty situation again. At this time, Wu Yue and I couldn't do anything. We could only place all our hopes on the fatty. At this time, the fatty finally moved. As he moved, the power of the formation appeared in the statues again, and the seventh Nine Palace formation gradually appeared. Although he had made some progress on his side, I didn't know if it was because I kept turning back to look, but it made Lu Xingyang suspicious. His eyes were originally focused on Wu Yue and the Taoist, but now he suddenly turned his head and looked at the fatty. At this time, the power of the formation in the group of statues had reached a shocking level. Although Lu Xingyang wasn't proficient in formations, he had suffered from the 10-terminal formation before. So, with just one glance, he obviously felt that something was wrong. He looked at it in silence for a few seconds, then lifted his foot and walked toward the fatty. The fatty was our last hope. If Lu Xingyang saw through us, we really wouldn't have a chance. At this time, I didn't care if I was Lu Xingyang's opponent or not. I gritted my teeth and stepped forward, blocking in front of him. Lu Xingyang looked at me maliciously, his eyes filled with anger. He didn't say anything and directly waved his right hand. He flew into the air, over my head, and landed on the fatty's side. I became even more anxious. I gritted my teeth and chased after him again. However, Lu Xingyang's speed was extremely fast, and I couldn't catch up with him. If he reached the fatty, let alone continuing to set up the formation, I was afraid that the fatty wouldn't be his match at all. He would die here. Thinking about this, I didn't hesitate anymore. I opened my mouth and took out the Xianyuan sword. Chapter 718. Even though my cultivation was far inferior to Lu Xingyang's, The Xian Yuan sword wasn't an ordinary weapon. Its speed was extremely fast, like a shooting star, as it chased after Lu Xinjiang. Finally, just as he was about to reach the bronze statue, I stabbed toward his back. I didn't know if Lu Xinjiang didn't care about me, or if he knew that the situation was critical, but he focused all his attention on the fatty and didn't care about my attack. Thus, the Xian Yuan sword wasn't obstructed at all and directly stabbed his body. After receiving the Xian Yuan sword's attack, even iron bones would shatter, not to mention Lu Xinjiang's broken body. Following a scream, Lu Xinjiang's flying movements slowed down and his body fell from the sky. After my attack succeeded, I finally relaxed a little. However, I didn't dare to slack off. I exerted strength in my legs and dashed towards Lu Xinjiang, blocking his body. On the way there, I guessed that Lu Xinjiang might have been heavily injured by that sword strike. However, when I arrived in front of him, I discovered that this fellow's body was made of some unknown material. That sword strike didn't even leave a wound on his body. It only left a large hole in the clothes on his back. Of course, not having a wound didn't mean that he wasn't injured. When I arrived in front of him, Lu Xinjiang was still sitting on the ground. When I extended my hand to retrieve the Xian Yuan sword and looked at his body, Lu Xinjiang angrily stood up. I didn't know how injured he was, but he angrily roared at me and sent a palm strike. Lu Xinjiang was anxious, but I was even more anxious than him. Whether or not I could keep Lu Xinjiang here wasn't only related to my safety, it was also related to the survival of the fatty and Wu Yue. Thus, when facing Lu Xinjiang's attack, I didn't retreat and used my true essence to receive it. Lu Xinjiang's attack didn't have any extra movements. He just waved his hand and sent a palm strike. However, this simple palm strike contained an earth-shaking aura. A ball of pitch-black true essence shot out from his withered palm. It was like a demonic palm that came from the netherworld as it charged towards me. I didn't dare to be careless. I used the Heavenly Dipper 9 steps and used the Heavenly Dipper 9 steps to raise a barrier. At the same time, with the buff from the Heavenly Dipper 9 steps, I brandished the Xian Yuan sword in my hand and used the emotionless sword path. Lu Xinjiang's attack came like the wind. Using the power of the Seal Heavenly Master to resist the attack of the Sun God Heavenly Master, the result could be imagined. When the Astral Step barrier came into contact with Lu Xinjiang's demonic palm, it instantly let out a crisp sound and shattered like an eggshell. My defense was broken, and my blood throbbed in my meridians, shaking me so much that I couldn't even hold the Xian Yuan sword steadily. However, Lu Xinjiang's attacks didn't stop. Quite the contrary, they became even fiercer. He separated his hands and summoned a gust of cold wind to attack me. Without the protection of the Astral Step barrier, the moment Lu Xinjiang raised his hand, I felt a cold wind sweep past my face, burning with pain. However, I couldn't care about that right now. I clenched my teeth and steadied my mind, suppressing my restless Zhen Yuan. I raised the Xian Yuan sword once again. I didn't choose to dodge. Instead, I directly attacked Lu Xinjiang. Lu Xinjiang's attack was ferocious and my speed was also very fast. Just as the Xian Yuan sword was sent out, it collided with that enormous palm. Shortly after, a vast power surged through my arm, causing my blood to boil. Right at that moment, I twisted my wrist and the sword energy gathered on the Xian Yuan sword exploded. The sharp sword energy shuttled back and forth in Lu Xinjiang's demonic palm. At the start, it couldn't enter, but in the end, under the stimulation of the sword energy, his demonic palm couldn't block the power of the god artifact and was shattered into pieces. With Lu Xinjiang's strength, he shouldn't have been like this when fighting me. From this, one could see that the Xian Yuan sword's attack had caused him quite a bit of injury. Seeing that his attack had been nullified, Lu Xinjiang finally stopped charging forward and stood still in front of me. The black Zhen Yuan around his body surged. Behind the silver mask, a pair of sinister eyes stared at me and said angrily, "Very good, Zhou Yi. Since you're asking for death, then I'll fulfill your wish." After saying that, his hands formed claws in the air, and like an eagle, he pounced at me once more. After that strike, I was heavily injured, but fortunately, I still had enough Zhen Yuan. The Xian Yuan sword danced in my hand, and the power of the feeling sword path was unleashed once more. After taking 2 of his attacks, I thought that with the support of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper and the Xian Yuan sword, I would be able to fight against the injured Lu Xingyang. But this time, after the sword energy clashed with his claws, I knew that I was wrong. I didn't know if Lu Xingyang had recovered from his injuries or something, but this time, he just casually swiped with his claws, and the sword energy from the Xian Yuan sword was shattered and dissipated to the side. With the power of the Xian Yuan sword and the power of the feeling sword path, the sword energy that I had used all of my cultivation, it disappeared just like that. Lu Xingyang's claws didn't seem to have any injuries at all. It was just that his speed was slightly slower, but he still pounced at me. I quickly retracted the Xian Yuan sword and used the feeling sword path to meet Lu Xingyang's claws. However, the amount of Zhen Yuan that I used to activate the Xian Yuan sword was far less than before. I knew that I definitely wouldn't be able to stop Lu Xingyang. So, I shook my left hand and took out the armor-removing sword. I used my Zhen Yuan to activate it and chased after the Xian Yuan sword. With the 2 swords as one, I had almost used up the last bit of Zhen Yuan in my body. Fortunately, Lu Xingyang's attack was once again blocked by me. His forward momentum was completely stopped. He stood a few meters in front of me and continuously waved his claws, fighting against the 2 swords. His attacks were very ferocious. Every move he made seemed to be casual, but it was filled with killing intent. It was fortunate that the 2 swords in my hands, no matter if it was the armor-removing sword or the Xian Yuan sword, were extraordinary. It was also because of the 2 swords that the pressure on me gradually eased. Lu Xingyang and I fought back and forth. Although it was dangerous, it wasn't completely ineffective. At the very least, Lu Xingyang was temporarily restrained by me and couldn't pose a threat to the fatty. At the same time, the fatty side was also reporting success. After completing the 7th formation, the 8th formation was also completed. He only needed 2 more to complete it. With the coordination of the 8-9 palaces' great formations, the power of the 10 absolute ancient formations was starting to show. The 8-9 palaces' great formations were interlinked. The moment they were activated, the formation's power became several times denser. The aura around the fatty also became much sharper. However, compared to the fatty's success, Wu Yue's side was in danger again. Not long after I started fighting with Lu Xingyang, the Daozi that had been watching the battle seemed to have become impatient. He handed the zither case to Li Chunxiu and personally joined the battle. Wu Yue originally didn't have any advantage against the others. His own power was completely restrained by the Fushi zither and the zither case. It wasn't easy for him to persevere for so long. After the Daozi joined the battle, the situation was completely tilted to the side of Dragon Tiger Mountain. After several dangerous escapes, Wu Yue finally couldn't hold on anymore. His body shook, and he was sucked in by the huge suction force from the zither case. You're still worried about others? Worry about yourself first. While I was distracted to observe Wu Yue, Lu Xingyang suddenly shouted. He raised his hands high and created thousands of black clouds above his head. It was as if he was holding boiling water and splashed it towards me. I had never seen Lu Xingyang's divine power before. However, just the aura that it revealed at the beginning made me feel a huge pressure. I looked at Lu Xingyang and finally retracted my gaze from Wu Yue. Wu Yue knew our plan, so she definitely wouldn't give up so easily. Moreover, Daozi was still waiting for her in front. If she surrendered now, she wouldn't be the Wu Yue that had waited for Daozi for 100 years. So, my top priority was to stall Lu Xingyang and continue to buy time for the fatty. Right at that moment, there was another movement from the bronze statue behind me. With this movement, the 9th 9 Palace's great formation was completed. There was only one step left before the completion of the 10 Extremes Great Formation. Feeling the aura of the 10 Absolute Formation, I was instantly excited. I crossed the armor-removing sword and Xian Yuan sword in front of my chest and focused on dealing with Lu Xingyang's attack. The completion rate of the 10 absolute ancient formation was getting higher and higher. Lu Jianyang became more and more anxious. His eyes revealed an ominous glint as he released another attack. This attack was extremely fast. Once it left Lu Jianyang's control, it converged on the previous attack like a sharp arrow. Chapter 719. After clashing with Lu Jianyang so many times, the Zhen Qi that I had just recovered was about to be used up. I looked at Lu Jianyang from afar through the fierce attack. His condition didn't look too good. Even though his face was covered by the silver mask, his eyes seemed to have lost a lot of vigor. It seemed that this attack had consumed a lot of his energy. If I could block this attack, then Lu Jianyang wouldn't be able to do anything to me for a period of time. That way, I would be able to buy some time for the fatty. The only problem now was, could I block this attack? Lu Jianyang's face was playful, and he didn't rush towards me. It was obvious that he was confident in this attack. Even with his strength, he had spent a lot of energy to use this attack. Its power was undeniable. My heart sank, but I didn't have time to think about it. I took a deep breath and prepared to raise my hand to block the attack. Right at that moment, a voice suddenly rang out in my head. "Brat, don't rush. You won't be able to block this attack. Empty your body and cross the Xian Yuan sword with the armor-stripping sword. I will control your body." I was stunned, but immediately reacted. This was the sound of the armor-stripping sword. During the All-Heaven competition, he had helped me once before going into a deep sleep. After that, I had called out to him many times but didn't receive any response. Who would have thought that he would wake up now? Last time, he had controlled my body and helped me defeat my opponent. How could I not trust him? Moreover, I was facing Lu Jianyang. Without his help, I wouldn't have any chance of winning. Rather than losing, it would be better to fight for life and trust in the armor-stripping sword. Thus, after I reacted, I immediately stopped what I was doing and retracted the last bit of Zhen Qi in my body. The situation was critical, and I didn't have time to ask anything. After I retracted my Zhen Qi, I followed his instructions and emptied my body. I crossed the Xian Yuan sword and the armor-stripping sword. At this moment, the sound of armor being removed rang out in my head again. "Brat, the Xian Yuan sword in your hand is an ancient godly weapon, yet you're using it as a fire stick. It's such a waste of your talent. Look carefully, my spiritual sense can only recover enough for one attack. How much you can comprehend depends on you." After I said that, the armor-stripping sword instantly took control of my body. Circulating the remaining Zhen Yuan in my body, I brandished the Xian Yuan sword in one hand and the armor-stripping sword in the other. With the two of them working together, I looked like a butterfly dancing in the air. The body of the Xian Yuan sword was bright yellow, and every time it swept through the air, it would sprinkle down an expanse of fierce light. As for the armor-stripping sword, after a period of nourishment, it had already recovered 80 to 90% of its power. Even though it wasn't very eye-catching when placed next to the Xian Yuan sword, every time it made a move, the blade of the sword would explode with silver stars. It was extremely extraordinary. The armor-stripping sword's movements were extremely quick. It looked like there was no order to it, but there was a hidden mystery behind it. My gaze was glued to the two treasured swords. Just as I was feeling that it was mysterious, the armor-stripping sword let out a light shout, and the two treasured swords merged together. My Zhen Qi took advantage of the situation and surged out, splitting into two parts, one big and one small. The big part flowed on the Xian Yuan sword while the small part remained on the armor-stripping sword. Even though there wasn't much Zhen Qi left in my body, under the armor-stripping sword, as ferocious activation, it rapidly surged out. In a short moment, it was completely released. The Zhen Qi on the two treasured swords had reached its peak. At that moment, the black cloud that Lu Jianyang had activated was less than a meter away from me. Just as it was about to reach me, the armor-stripping sword controlled my hands to push to the sides. The two swords, one gold and one silver, were like two gold and silver dragons that spiraled out. I could faintly hear the roars of the two dragons, one big and one small. Following the two dragon roars, a lustrous white barrier formed by sword chi suddenly appeared in front of me. As it moved forward, it continuously expanded to both sides. At first, it was only able to cover my entire body. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to 12 meters. Even if 10 more fatties were to be stuffed into the barrier, there would still be space. Lu Jinyang's attack was extremely fast, but the speed of the barrier was even faster. Even though the black cloud had already arrived in front of me, before it could react, it was already enveloped by the barrier. The black cloud continued to rumble within the barrier. Its aura didn't decrease at all, but it couldn't advance any further. It was like boiling water meeting ice, dissipating. In a short moment, the two seemed to dissolve and dissipate. I looked at Lu Jinyang. He obviously didn't think that I would be able to block that attack. The playfulness in his eyes instantly disappeared and was replaced with rage. Unfortunately, he was continuously injured, and it seemed that he wouldn't be able to make a move for a while. He could only watch on helplessly. The danger had been resolved, but Armor's stripping sword didn't fall unconscious like he usually did. Instead, he sighed in my heart. It's because your cultivation isn't high enough. If you were at the same level as that evil being, he would have already died under the Xian Yuan sword's attack. It would be best if I could kill Lu Jinyang, but I also understood that under the absolute difference in power, it wasn't easy for Armor's stripping sword to do that. Thus, I didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. I hurriedly said, "Thank you for your guidance, Senior. I'm already very satisfied with this result." Armor's stripping sword didn't reply to my words. Instead, he suddenly sighed. I didn't know what he was thinking, but his voice sounded helpless. It was as if he was talking to himself. He opened his mouth and sighed. Emotions and love are the most worrisome things. I don't know if I was right to let you practice the emotional sword path. He seemed to be asking me, but it also seemed like he was talking to himself. Just as I was thinking about how to reply, the fatty's voice sounded from behind me. "Third baby, it's done. I've finally done it." Following that voice, the bronze statues that had been silently moving finally moved. Their massive bodies started to move as if they were ferocious tigers that had been hiding for a long time and had finally revealed their fangs. I hurriedly turned my head to look. At that moment, the fatty was sitting in the middle of the 9 palaces formation. He was panting while his hands continuously formed hand seals. It was obvious that he was controlling the formation. As the fatty's hands moved faster and faster, the statues started to move. The power of the formation surged to the sky, and it was extremely majestic. While I was pleasantly surprised, I glanced at Lu Jinyang from the corner of my eyes. At that moment, the formation was completed. He seemed to feel a strong sense of danger. He didn't even care about his consumption of energy and directly pounced at me. It seemed like he wanted to use his physical body to fight me. After the 10 absolute formation was set up, our auras completely changed. I wasn't anxious anymore, but Lu Jinyang was like a cornered beast that was still fighting. A mad beast attack power was the strongest, so there was no need for me to do anything else. Just as I was about to dodge, the fatty's voice spread over. "Third baby, don't worry about him. Just put in the formation and give him to me. Go and save Wu Yu first. I'm afraid she can't hold on any longer." The fatty's mind was clear. I was originally prepared to dodge the mad Lu Jinyang. After hearing the fatty's words, I naturally didn't hesitate anymore. I turned around and dashed past the bronze statues at the side. Our current positions were in the 9 palaces formation, so Lu Jinyang didn't hesitate and directly charged at me like a mad dog. He wasn't as calm as he had been before. Under the fatty's control, the bronze statues in front of me quickly dodged and cleared a path for me. However, as Lu Jinyang moved forward, countless bronze statues appeared and blocked his way. Lu Jinyang's speed was originally much faster than mine. However, with the fatty's interference, he couldn't even use 50% of his full speed. The distance between us grew further and further. In the end, I couldn't even see his figure through the many bronze statues. I could only hear an extremely angry roar behind me. At that moment, I finally relaxed. With Lu Zhenyan's current state, he shouldn't be able to cause any more waves in the 10 absolute formation. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.